Chapter 181. The True Predator. Above the desolate island ground, only a few players remained, but it was safe to say they were the best of the temple's surviving students. Each one had lived their own story since the start of the trial. Near one of the island's darker corners, that colossal tree still served as a sanctuary for the princess. Sansa, along with Adriana, had been staying there, and now Jessica Thivenin had joined them not long ago. Rain fell often, so the trio found shelter inside the tree, which resembled a natural cave. Sansa, her golden hair soaked, eyes tinted with black, stared absently at the gloomy sky. Who knew what occupied her mind at that moment? No one could say for sure. Princess, staying out in the rain like this isn't good for you. It's fine, Jessica. I like the feeling of rain soaking through me. Jessica called out to her from inside the tree. She had tried several times to convince Sansa to come in, but the princess refused. Adriana, on the other hand, had stayed inside the whole time, quiet and composed, likely because Jessica was nearby. But Sansa never moved from her place, the rain washing over her. To the princess it felt comforting, as though it were cleansing her of everything that had scarred her wounded soul. Beneath that downpour, she found something close to peace. With a faint smile, Sansa turned toward Jessica. "Are you sure you want to stay here, Jessica? You were in the top ranks not long ago." It was true. Jessica Thivenin had held a very high rank since the trial began. But ever since choosing to stay close to the princess, she had slipped out of the top 10. "There's no point in trying. I can't beat monsters like that." After her crushing defeat at the hands of Snow, Jessica had accepted that first place was out of reach. She'd already secured qualification, since the second years hadn't been particularly outstanding this year. And so, she remained at the princess's side, to protect her. "If that's your decision, I won't argue." "Thank you, my princess." Jessica Thivenin treated the princess with deep respect, but when it came to Adriana, she was cold. To Jessica, the girl was little more than a leech clinging to the princess for selfish gain, even though Sansa had declared her a friend. Now, the second year's strongest had already begun to think of ways to get rid of her soon. Amid all that, Jessica's body suddenly tensed. Both Sansa and Adriana frowned. They all heard it. The sound of footsteps, heavy, constant, pounding the earth. It was growing louder and louder. Whatever was approaching, there were a lot of them. Too many. "Get back, princess." Jessica darted forward, gripping her crescent-shaped sword and placing herself in front of Sansa. The princess remained perfectly calm. Behind them, Adriana readied her spear. What the hell? The sounds were overwhelming, like an army charging their way, and just a few seconds later, they finally saw the source. With multiple limbs and mask-like faces, they were the terrifying creatures of the Beige. "Feed me! Feed me! Me! Me!" Dozens appeared at once. The numbers were so insane that Jessica's face darkened instantly. "Princess, I'll try to hold them off. Please run." Jessica charged straight into the approaching nightmare. Pushing her aura to the limit, she released a powerful field of gravity, forcing the creatures back. With her signature blade, she lunged at the closest one. "Feed me! Feed me! Shut up!" Jessica slashed with ferocity, clashing against the Beige horror. She had the upper hand. Her strikes severed its limbs quickly, then she crushed it down with her gravity field. But that only worked in a one-on-one fight. No sooner had Jessica slain one of the Beige, covered in its foul blood, than a massive swarm of the same creatures surged toward her, tearing through her gravity field with overwhelming force. At this rate, she'd be completely devoured. Jessica was confused. Why were nightmare creatures attacking in such overwhelming numbers? It didn't make sense. But something about the Beige's behavior felt off. They didn't seem to be attacking. They were running. She couldn't process her thoughts properly amidst the chaotic stampede of nightmare creatures. Behind her, Adriana grabbed Sansa's hand, her face pale with fear. "Sansa, we need to run. We can't fight them." Adriana was already trembling. She could barely hold her spear, let alone fight. But Sansa remained perfectly calm. She pulled her hand away from Adriana and walked toward the battlefield. "Are you suggesting we abandon Jessica while we run for safety?" Adriana said nothing. She knew it would be a cowardly act, but she didn't see any other way. Just looking at those things made her shiver. Her nerves couldn't handle it. But Sansa didn't flinch. "It's fine. They won't lay a finger on her." Sansa's eyes darkened. "I won't allow it." Back on the front lines, Jessica was completely surrounded. She barely deflected the flurry of wild attacks coming from every direction. "Feed me! Feed me!" One of the beige found a gap in her defenses. Its limbs were just about to strike her. But the impact never came. Jessica blinked. A massive black hand had appeared out of nowhere. That terrifying, shadowy hand gripped the beige mid-scream. The suffering didn't last long. The hand slammed it violently into a massive boulder, crushing its skull. The blow was so brutal, the beige turned into a mess of pulverized flesh. Sansa now stood beside Jessica. In front of them, dozens more of the same creature. The princess extended her hand toward them. It looked as though she was inviting them to grab her. But that wasn't it. As her hand moved forward, Sansa's shadow expanded, stretching far ahead, covering the ground beneath the beige horde. The nightmare creatures suddenly found themselves standing atop a shadow pulsing with cursed aura. Then, with another flick of her hand, the shadow exploded. Dozens of massive, spear-like tendrils shot up from the ground, piercing through the beige like mad, skewering them into twisted sacks of spikes. Their bodies were lifted high by the black tendrils, as streams of crimson blood gushed down the black spears, staining them with a darker hue. It was a horrifying sight. Jessica Thivonen stared in disbelief. The princess beside her still wore the same calm expression, but she looked like a completely different person. It wasn't just her eyes that had turned black. Even her golden hair now showed streaks of black. Jessica didn't know what to do, so she grabbed Sansa's shoulder, who looked like someone caught in a trance. "Princess!" At the sound of her voice, it was as if Sansa snapped out of it. The shadow receded, and the impaled beige fell from the sky, crashing to the ground, powerless. Sansa held her head, a blank expression on her face. She said nothing. Jessica hesitated before speaking. "Princess, are you?" "I'm fine," Sansa answered quickly. "It's nothing. Everything's fine." Jessica said nothing more. Neither did Adriana, still trembling behind them. But they were both likely thinking the same thing. What was that power? The answer was vague, but that aura they had felt, it sent a chill down their spines, shaking them to the core. Amid the corpses of the beige, they didn't even have a moment to think. When the ground suddenly trembled, far more violently than before. "What now?" Jessica cursed. It only took a single second for her expression to darken completely. All three girls heard it. A deep, sorrowful wail, accompanied by a terrifying roar. Adriana looked like she could faint at any moment. They all stared at the enormous creature approaching them, and as the realization hit, Jessica finally understood what was happening. The beige weren't attacking. They were fleeing, running from a predator far more terrifying. The Lady of Eight Legs, that monstrous being, with her countless limbs and grotesque spider-like form. She was now unbelievably close. They'd been too caught up fighting the nightmare creatures earlier to notice her presence. And now she was right there, within reach. They all froze in place, staring at her. And she stared back. Dozens of horrific eyes locked onto them. The Lady of Eight Legs was watching from a distance. But all her eyes were fixed on just one person, the princess, Sansa. Those black eyes met hers, and the lady stopped. Everyone stood frozen, unable to comprehend the scene. Jessica felt like her heart might explode at any second. And Adriana, she had already fainted. The Lady of Eight Legs remained motionless, simply staring. Minutes passed. Then, something strange happened. She moved. The Lady of 8 Legs stirred. But she didn't approach. Instead, she turned away and left. Jessica's eyes widened in disbelief, watching the nightmare creature walk away, avoiding them. She couldn't believe what she'd seen. With a stunned expression, she turned her head toward the princess, who was still staring intently at the Nightmare Lord. What just happened? Why didn't she attack? Jessica didn't know the answer, but for some reason, she was certain the reason was standing right next to her. Because maybe the Lady of 8 Legs wasn't the apex predator on this island. Chapter 182. Dragon and Serpent. Day 19 of the island trial. The days were passing quickly now. The end was slowly coming into view, and the names of those who would advance had begun to surface. Immersed in their own battles, the players fought with everything they had. Ceres Moonlight's POV. How many days had passed since I first stepped onto this island? I brushed my white hair gently, examining its color. The color I inherited from my mother. I sometimes wondered, what do people see when they look at me? Their eyes said a lot. I often heard people praise my beauty, but just as often, I saw the daggers in their gaze. Eyes filled with envy. But envy of what? What did they see in me? Maybe, if they had looked inside instead of just the surface, they might have realized how empty it all was. They might have seen the strings that have been moving this body all these years. Since that day, it felt like my mind was on the verge of exploding. I lost control. And then, I used a power I didn't even know I had. As if it had answered my call. A call born from emotions that tore me apart. My life was built on a lie. Everything I believed in since the night my sister died was nothing but a puppet show, masterfully written. And the one who shattered that illusion was the very person I had hated. Who am I even lying to anymore? I never accepted the death of the father I despised from the depths of my soul. So I looked for someone else. Someone to throw all that hatred onto. And that person was Fry Starlight. But fate had its own ideas. Of all people, he became the one who freed me from that puppet show. At the very least, that emptiness inside has been filled now. Filled with hatred. But this time toward the right person. Baylor Moonlight. That cursed puppet master. He never left my mind. I felt like I was losing it, going mad. The only time I felt some form of release was when I faced those nightmare creatures. I wielded ice with complete freedom. I felt like my perspective had become clearer, sharper, stronger. I shattered everything that came near, with spears, swords, and then those spiked ice vines, slithering like serpents, tearing my enemies apart. I walked slowly, leaving a trail of frozen artistry behind me with each step. My power was growing. But still, not enough. Not enough to kill him. So step by step, I will continue to rebuild the shattered pieces inside me. That broken core, scattered into hundreds of fragments. And when the time comes, I'll tear him apart. I embraced myself with wings of pure ice. The puppet show is over. But the performance isn't finished. Not until you're dead, Baylor Moonlight. Fry Starlight's perspective. Day 20 of the island trial. 10 days left until the trial ends. I tracked Sansa's location and was heading her way, but I had to stop when I noticed that damn Lady of 8 Legs roaming nearby. So I was forced to wait until that cursed thing passed. Sitting atop a massive tree, I watched that dumb creature wander around aimlessly. How long are you planning to stay here? Be a good little spider and go play somewhere else. I scratched my head in frustration. My condition was a disaster. 20 days in the wilderness brought back vivid memories of the eastern nightmare lands. Felt like returning to my roots. And because of that, I was absolutely filthy. I need a bath. I doubt anyone could even come near me at this point. If someone got a whiff of this smell, they might press charges for murder via stench. I'd probably be dragged before Ivar to explain how I killed temple students with my reeking aura, only to get expelled and sent back to House Starlight for a long punishment bath. Lost in thought, I slapped my forehead with a tired sigh. This is bad. Crazy Fry was starting to resurface. Staying in a nightmare zone wasn't good. That metaphorical switch in my brain might accidentally flip and turn me into a lunatic again. I leapt down and bolted toward the lake. Bath first. I arrived quickly. Gazing into the clear waters, I was just about to remove my armor, but stopped when I sensed someone else nearby. A closer look confirmed it. He was sitting there. Blonde hair, broad-shouldered, muscular frame. His well-defined chest was fully exposed, along with his shoulders and that dragon tattoo across his arm. Demon! I stared at him for a moment. He did the same. I wasn't sure what the right move was. Should I attack him? Avoid him? But he broke the silence first. What are you staring at? You gonna get in? Or just gawk at me like some weirdo? Or are you one of those guys into other guys? If it's the latter, sorry, ladies only. I felt stupid for overthinking anything in front of Demon. Didn't expect you to be so chill with someone who might attack you any second. The naked demon didn't even flinch. He kept relaxing like nothing mattered. Don't be an idiot. I'm bathing right now, I'm not gonna fight. Besides, my body is my weapon. I can handle whatever shows up. Fair point. I removed my armor completely, revealing my bare body. Six-pack abs, chest, arms. I had it all. But compared to Demon, the size difference was huge. I looked like a fit athlete. Demon looked like a professional bodybuilder. I relaxed on the opposite side, letting my body unwind. Demon's eyes lingered on the snake tattoo along my left arm. It was kind of funny. Two shirtless guys. One with a dragon tattoo, the other with a serpent. With a smirk, I gestured for him to look away. Don't stare too hard. I'm also into women. Not gorillas like you. Bastard. Demon smirked too, amused at me throwing his words back at him. And just like that, I ended up sharing a bath with the last person I ever expected. Chapter 183. Approaching the end. Fry Starlight's POV. For the first time in what felt like forever, I actually felt alive, as my muscles slowly relaxed beneath the cold water. It had been raining for weeks across this forsaken island. Naturally, the river demon and I were sitting in was freezing. But the chill helped soothe the tension in my body, easing the fatigue if only slightly. And ever since the moonlight incident, I'd started to prefer the cold anyway. As if my body had changed somehow after enduring that curse for so long. Silence lingered between me and Demon. Minutes passed slowly. Eventually, he was the first to move. He stood, showing off that hulking physique of his, and began to leave. Leaving already? I asked casually. Demon responded in the same indifferent tone. There's no point in sharing space with someone like you. I won't attack you now. But if I see you again, I'll crush you. This was the second time I'd crossed paths with Demon on this island. The first was during our three-way battle with Magnus. And now, this. I wonder, are you really capable of that? Crushing me? Demon wasn't fazed by the provocation. To him, my words meant nothing. Crushing someone like you is easy. Fry Starlight. You're hollow. My expression shifted slightly at that. Hollow? You're just an empty vessel. Your ambition begins and ends in the same place. You're chasing something trivial, something handed to you by someone else. I can see it clearly in those dead eyes of yours. He strapped on his armor, not even bothering to look back. You're not a real warrior, Fry Starlight. You're not even worthy of a real fight. My dragon will swallow your pathetic serpent whole. I was left in silence, with no words to respond. Demon Valerian had already vanished in a crackle of lightning. But those words, empty vessel, huh? I closed my eyes and slowly sank deeper into the cold water. He was right. I really was just an empty shell, compared to people like Demon or Snow, even the other elites. My passion, my entire struggle, it all revolved around the Victoriad. As a person, I had no dreams, No desires in this world. Because I'm not Fry Starlight. But he was wrong about one thing. This trivial goal of mine. The pain I've endured. The sacrifices I've made to reach it. If you belittle that, if you mock what I'm willing to give up for this so-called meaningless dream, you won't even realize when the serpent coils around your proud dragon's neck. I rose from the water slowly, step by step. My skin was spotless, a nearly perfect athletic body, pale and unmarred. But the number of scars carved into this body hadn't truly disappeared. Ever since the Shadow Sect incident, my body had begun to regenerate flawlessly, leaving no marks behind. Without that passive ability, what would I even look like by now? I lowered my gaze, staring at that body. I could still see them. Hundreds of wounds, tears, bruises, and I would keep getting more of them until I achieved that trivial goal they all laughed at, winning the Victoriad, and finding my way back to my world, to my home. I strapped on my armor at once, then dashed back into the forest's towering trees. I needed to find the princess, and fast. Later, not far from the river where Fry had bathed, a group of figures appeared all at once, led by a young man with a massive frame and blazing orange hair. Where is he? Magnus Greel scanned the area with a sharp gaze. He was answered by the slim, sharp-eyed Reagan. He was here, but he keeps moving. Makes it harder to track him down. Though they had located Fry multiple times using the tracking feature, he never stayed in one place long enough. The smartwatch only displayed his last known location. So by the time they arrived, he'd already moved. This same situation had repeated several times over the past 2 days. And because of that, the third years had lost a considerable number of points. This is pointless if we keep going like this. Magnus spoke as calmly as he could, though his patience was clearly wearing thin. We split up from here. Use all your points if necessary. We'll surround every location he shows up at. Once anyone finds him, send the signal immediately. Understood. Everyone responded without hesitation, pushing deeper into the forest. Meanwhile, Fry Starlight had already covered a significant distance. But the students weren't the only ones roaming the island. The professors moved constantly in the shadows, keeping a close watch. The most active of them all was Phoenix, who had been assigned to oversee the Lady of Eight Legs. In case of emergency, he had permission to eliminate her entirely. And that prodigy was certainly capable of doing it. But because of that responsibility, Phoenix Sunlight had been completely restricted. He no longer roamed freely like he had at the start of the exam. And because of that, the time had finally come for the hidden powers lurking in the shadows to make their move. On the golden shores of the desolate island, a well-dressed man with jet-black hair strolled forward, wearing a crisp formal suit. His glasses shimmered under the darkened sky. Facing him now stood another man, muscular with a thick white beard. It was Professor Kaiser Moonlight alongside another figure. "What's the situation?" Kaiser asked. The man before him responded. "The coordinates have been set. With the prince's assistance, the final stage is ready. We'll end this on the last day of the exam." Kaiser nodded silently. He clenched his fist, recalling the destruction of his family. "I'll kill every last one of them, everyone responsible." Because of that night, Kaiser had lost his only brother. His family was nearly wiped out. Even the Lord of House Moonlight, once their greatest power, was gone. And there was only one person they held responsible: Fry Starlight. Some within the Moonlight family were convinced he was the cause, though many disagreed, choosing instead to blame the Ultras entirely. The old man before him stroked his beard, sensing his companion's unrest. "There's not much time left. Stay focused. Our job isn't over yet. Mist Sun keeps attacking our allies." Kaiser's expression darkened at the name. Why would the son of that assassin get involved in this? And how the hell does he even know who our people are? The old man shook his head. "If I had that answer, I would have dealt with it already. Ghost was proving to be an unpredictable threat, and at the moment they couldn't risk taking any direct action against him. If he finds out about our plan, if he tells Fry Starlight, everything could fall apart. Kaiser trusted the Moonlight students wouldn't betray him, but who could say what might happen? He took a breath, then made a decision. Keep him away from Fry Starlight. Use the same method as before. The old man understood immediately and nodded. Understood. I'll leave now. Being seen together for too long will raise suspicion. Kaiser said nothing. He simply watched his companion vanish as if into thin air. I'll be waiting for the day of reckoning, old friend. Kaiser Moonlight continued his patrol across the island, as if nothing had happened. But the final days of the exam promised far more than anyone could imagine. Chapter 184. The Princess's Move. Among students who fought to survive, and others who clashed endlessly among themselves, Princess Sansa Valerian sat quietly inside her tree hollow shelter. Adriana was still there. Jessica, meanwhile, had been coming and going regularly, gathering food, clean water, and supplies, even though the princess had never asked her to. The last day in particular had been oddly quiet. Adriana hadn't approached the princess. She hadn't spoken to her at all. Jessica only spoke when it involved their immediate needs or survival. As a result, Sansa often drifted into her own thoughts. Adriana hadn't noticed at first, but after struggling to sleep lately, shaken by recent events, she caught on to something unusual. Sansa Valerian never slept. She sat in silence, lost in thought for hours. Sometimes she wandered outside, then returned. It was uncomfortable in a way, until that day came. -21 days since the island trial began. As usual, the girls sat within the massive tree. Jessica was away at the moment. Then something changed. Sansa's eyes lit up. She felt something. Rain poured heavily outside, as it had so often lately. The students had grown used to it. Sansa walked to the entrance, peering outside. The beige corpses were still there. Jessica hadn't finished clearing them out, but the rain had washed over the decaying bodies, cleansing them somewhat. And from amidst those corpses, someone appeared. Adriana tensed immediately at the sight. Lately, even her own shadow frightened her, let alone something like this. A figure emerged. A young man, ghostly in appearance, with stark white hair. But Sansa narrowed her eyes, studying him. Fry! With a faint smile, the boy stepped forward. That black armor, those swirling, vortex-like eyes, dark lines traced beneath them, a sign of sleep deprivation. And yet, somehow, he still carried a face that could be called handsome, even compared to the other temple elites. Like a fallen prince from a long-lost wicked kingdom. Hello, Sansa. The way he approached made it clear. He wasn't lost. He had come here on purpose. Adriana instinctively raised her spear. Sansa, however, didn't move. Fry expected this sort of welcome, especially from Adriana, whose presence he hadn't anticipated. So he made his intentions clear from the start. There's no need for hostility. I didn't come here to fight. He glanced at the scattered beige corpses around him. Looks like you had some visitors recently, and dealt with them well. Sansa ignored the pointless commentary and went straight to the heart of the matter. Why are you here? Did you use points to locate me? Despite everything she'd been through lately, she was still a princess. She wasn't blind. She had noticed Frey's sudden point drop, the exact 500-point deduction. Connecting the dots wasn't hard, and Fry didn't deny it. I did. I came here for you, Sansa. His admission only deepened the confusion. But at the very least, she didn't see him as an enemy. You came for me, huh? Then come inside. You're soaked enough as it is. She turned her back to him and walked back into the tree. Adriana was stunned. Was she really going to let Fry inside? She tried to speak, but Sansa didn't give her the chance. Fry watched them both with a blank expression, then followed them inside. Even he hadn't expected Sansa to be so lenient, but she had probably read his intentions long ago. If he meant her harm, she would have sensed it immediately. The moment Fry stepped into their private shelter, he paused, his gaze scanning the space within. It was surprisingly spacious. Using simple resources, they had set up 3 separate sleeping areas. Food and supplies were neatly stored to the side. And the scent in the air, it was unmistakably feminine. The kind of scent that could only come from a space occupied by 3 girls. So much better than the filth outside. Frey's senses picked up on everything. Yet he didn't react. The princess gestured for him to sit. Adriana, on the other hand, distanced herself from him as much as possible. Every time their eyes met, the timid girl seemed to curl further into herself. Fry chuckled, recalling how she once spoke to him so casually, back when she didn't know who he was. Humans are selective by nature. They often go with the tide. If someone is labeled as a bad person by one group, that label sticks, following them all the way to their grave. And Frey's reputation was anything but favorable. He knew that very well. Now, sitting before the princess, the 2 locked eyes for a brief moment. Both of them had the same black eyes now. "So, do you have something to say?" Sansa asked, leaning against the table Jessica had built earlier. Fry crossed his arms and got straight to the point. Simply put, "I need your help, Sansa. I need help." Sansa. How many times had the princess heard those words from him in the past? But this was the first time she'd heard them since surviving the Ultras. Or rather, from this new Fry. "What exactly do you need me for? Are you trying to form a team?"
No.
"You don't strike me as someone who would." Fry shook his head, then began explaining. He had already decided. He would reveal everything. "I need your help dealing with your brother, Aegon." Sansa's expression darkened the moment she heard the name. Adriana, meanwhile, sprang to her feet, unable to accept what she was hearing. "Fry Starlight, how dare you try to turn Sansa against the prince like this?" Upon hearing her, both Fry and Sansa sighed at the same time. Clearly, the clueless girl still only saw Aegon as the perfect prince, unaware of his true nature. In her eyes, perhaps Sansa and Aegon were just loving siblings, merely caught in a rivalry. "Adriana, please don't get involved in this. I know better than you what I should or shouldn't do." Ordered by the princess herself, Adriana fell silent. She hadn't expected Sansa to take Frey's side in front of her. Returning to Fry, Sansa asked calmly, "What happened? How had Fry earned Aegon's hatred?" Fry explained it briefly. He didn't tell her exactly how he had sabotaged Aegon's plan involving Kai Luke, but he gave her a general overview, mixing a large part of the truth into his story. After piecing it together, "Aegon rallied the entire 3rd year against you, just to get you eliminated from the trial." Fry nodded. "That's right." Sansa thought deeply. For Aegon to label someone an enemy, it wasn't a trivial thing. Her brother saw people as pieces to play with, not equals. But she also knew some of Frey's secrets, about the strength he had been hiding. She could understand how things reached this point. "But I don't get it. Fry, with your current points, you've already passed the trial. Why risk going all the way against him?" In other words, Fry had enough points to avoid elimination. He could just stay out of trouble and let the trial end. But that wasn't an option. One of the trial's rules states that I must reach the final rendezvous point. If I'm eliminated before then, even with my current points, I won't be allowed to enter the Victoriad. The final rule of the island exam. Participants must reach the final designated zone, to be announced at the end of the trial. Failure to do so will result in disqualification. That single rule was a chain binding Fry, because he had to reach that point to secure his place in the finals. It made him the perfect target. The extremist group that wanted his head hadn't moved yet, and he couldn't waste time dealing with the 3rd years. Sansa stared at Fry for a moment, before finally asking a question that had lingered in her mind for some time. "Fry, what does the Victoriad mean to you?" Everything. Fry responded instantly. Seeing just how serious he was about it, Sansa didn't quite understand the reason, but she didn't press further. You need someone to keep the 3rd years off you until the trial ends, so you can reach the final zone safely. Fry nodded, even though that wasn't entirely true. What he truly needed was cover, to handle the Moonlight faction without distraction. But there was no point in telling Sansa that now. She thought for a moment before giving her answer. All right, I'll help you. Fry blinked in surprise at how quickly she agreed, but masked it with a small chuckle. Sorry, I always seem to end up using our friendship like this. In front of the apologetic Fry, Sansa shook her head. I'm not helping you out of kindness. I'm repaying a debt. You saved me once, remember? Her words pulled both of them back. To that day they faced Ferrith together. If it hadn't been for Fry, who knows what would have happened? The system played a big role, sure, but it didn't change the fact he'd saved her life. And with that, Fry had gotten what he came for. But he didn't even have time to lower his guard. In one swift motion, he drew his sword, blocking a sudden ambush from the side. Jessica Thievenin had returned, and she didn't look friendly at all. Fry instantly unleashed a wave of dark aura, pushing her back as she activated gravitational pressure to try and restrain him. Princess, get back. I'll deal with the intruder. She probably assumed he had come to steal their supplies, or that he was after the points on their heads, so she didn't hesitate to strike. Fry recognized her, and considered how to stop her without hurting her. But he didn't have to. Swoosh! Out of nowhere, hundreds of black threads lashed forward, wrapping tightly around Jessica and binding her completely. The strongest in the 2nd year couldn't do a thing against that power. Tied down by the black threads, Jessica finally froze, staring in stunned silence at the one responsible. Lower your aura, Jessica. He's a friend. The princess's calm words left no room for argument. Grudgingly, Jessica complied. She didn't exactly have a choice. On the other side, Fry was staring in silence at those threads, rising straight from Sansa's shadow. For some reason, his face darkened the moment he saw them. Sansa released Jessica, then issued her next order without missing a beat. Jessica, go gather the remaining 2nd-year students. Still confused, Jessica didn't fully understand what was going on, but Fry seemed to. Sansa, are you? She nodded, confirming what he had already suspected. Since Aegon rallied the 3rd years to attack you, we'll have the 2nd years defend you. Just as Aegon had the 3rd years backing him, Sansa already held the loyalty of the 2nd years. Fry had anticipated this type of support, which was why he chose her from the start. But Princess, if I leave now, it's an order. I'll explain the situation later. Jessica tried to protest, but the princess didn't give her the chance. Instead, she gathered her shadow and returned to Frey's side. Until Jessica brings everyone together, you'll stay here with us. Fry, if the 3rd year come for us before then. With a smile, she clasped her hands behind her back. Her pitch-black eyes gleamed with absolute clarity. I'll handle them myself. Fry stared at the princess standing before him. Even he hadn't expected this outcome. Chapter 185, Twists of Fate. Fry Starlight's POV. I never imagined I'd end up like this, sitting between 2 girls, hiding beneath the princess's cloak. Sansa had done exactly what I expected from the start. I was sure she had her own loyal students just like Aegon. That made dealing with the 3rd years a much more manageable task. But until all the 2nd years were gathered, I had to stay here, with her. Sitting beside the princess, I felt strange. After days of fighting and running non-stop since the trial began, this sudden stillness was unfamiliar. Adriana remained completely isolated. She hadn't said a word since Jessica left. Everyone was quiet. Only the sound of rainfall filled the space. Is it always like this between you two? Or am I the reason? The silence was starting to gnaw at me, so I broke it with a question. But Sansa simply shook her head. No. We've been like this even before you arrived. Before I arrived, huh? Does it have to do with the dead monsters outside? The way those creatures had been slaughtered so violently, the injuries made it obvious that whoever killed them was far stronger. And that person was sitting right next to me. That power Sansa had unleashed, it resembled shadow manipulation. But something about it felt different, its essence was off. Sansa, that power of yours. Don't talk about it. She cut me off sharply. Please. So it was a sensitive subject. Got it. I didn't pry. I wouldn't ask why she was using something that looked like a demon ability. I just wouldn't. She shifted the topic almost immediately. But you, of all people, going against Aegon? Did you finally decide to join the race for the throne? Given my influence within the Starlight family, it was a fair question. I have no interest in interfering. I'll leave the choice to my sister. Backing one heir meant making an enemy of the other. A 50-50 gamble. And Aegon had the upper hand, thanks to his achievements, and the fall of the Moonlight family who had once supported Sansa. She, on the other hand, had a powerful story of her own. The princess who returned from hell. It earned her a lot of support, especially from those who believed in fate. Surviving something no one else had. To them, it was a miracle. After all, everyone who had been with her had died. So, you're staying neutral. Sansa's expression remained unreadable. Did I disappoint you? Maybe she expected me to support her, especially considering our quiet, unspoken friendship. But she was surprisingly understanding. No, that's just the kind of person you are, Fry. You don't get involved in things that don't concern you. That's true. Talking with Sansa was going oddly well. Much smoother than with most people. Maybe it was because I didn't write much about her in the original story. I knew very little about her personality. In a way, she felt like me, an outsider in this world. I was someone who wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. And she was someone who should have died long ago. There was something refreshing about talking to someone whose mind I couldn't predict. Even though she seemed to read mine most of the time. Thinking about Aegon and Sansa, there was something that had been bugging me for a while. What happens to the loser? What do you mean? She asked, locking eyes with me. The loser of the throne race. What happens to them? Would they be exiled? Stripped of their title? Sansa's answer was something else entirely. She smiled, and I realized just how naive I'd been. Naturally, the loser dies. Dies? Seriously? Isn't that a little much? I mean, they're siblings from the same family. Sansa shook her head and began to explain. The winner can't allow the other to live. It's an unspoken law when it comes to this kind of battle. That's why Father forbade us from killing each other as long as we're inside the temple. That's too much. Would they really go that far? To kill your own family over a title, even if it's for the Emperor's seat? It seemed like Sansa was reading my thoughts, because she continued, even if we don't want to kill each other, our allies will push for it. They can't risk letting a wild card survive and undo everything they've built. That's what it means to be children of the royal family. We can blame fate for making us this way, or we can blame our father for deciding to have us both at the same time. She hugged her knees and stared quietly into the distance. Whether it's me or Aegon, at best, one of us will die after our time in the temple ends. That's our fate. And what a fate it was. That doesn't suit you, Sansa. What do you mean? I looked at the girl sitting next to me. I didn't know much about her. Only what I'd seen and heard so far. You just don't seem made for all that. If you ask me, you look more like an ordinary girl, not some tyrant empress ruling from a throne. That kind of life suited her more, far more honestly. Sansa chuckled quietly at my last comment. She could have taken offense. But she didn't. I agree with you, Fry. I think I'd much rather spend my days lounging around the temple gardens, playing with flowers, than any of this. She toyed with her fingers as if imagining that kind of life. But Fry, Things don't always go the way we want. Sometimes we just have to accept reality. She was right. I knew that, but I couldn't accept it. Because if I did, then everything I'd done until now would be a contradiction. If I accepted reality and sat still, that would mean I'd resign myself to being Fry Starlight forever. But I was working to shatter that reality by force. That was my path. As for Sansa, I wasn't in any position to tell her what to do. Maybe a real friend would have. Sorry. I made you talk about a lot of unpleasant things. I apologized, trying to shift the conversation away. But Sansa didn't seem bothered at all. It's fine, Fry. Talking with you is welcome here. It was better than being trapped in her own thoughts. Better than that suffocating silence. Somehow, she seemed like she was suffering more than me. Maybe I had a light at the end of my tunnel. Something I was chasing. But the tunnel she walked, it looked black all the way through. Chapter 186. A Quiet Night. Day 22 since the island trial began. We didn't sleep that night. Sansa stayed awake. As for me, it had become a habit. Jessica Thivenin still hadn't returned. Other than that, our day was rather uneventful. Sometimes I'd go out and kill any nightmare creature that got too close. Sansa always accompanied me, quietly watching from behind. Then we'd spend the rest of the night chatting about trivial things, conversations the princess deeply cherished. Ever since I stepped onto the island's lands, I found myself speaking more and more, like a sealed well had finally found its lid. Ding! The rankings had been updated. Sansa and I stared at the new board. 10 Rhaegan Zenon, 2,500 points. 9 Ragna Cloud, 2,900 points. 8 Dawn Polaris, 2,980 points. 7 Magnus Grell, 3,000 points. 6 Ghost Umbra, 3,100 points. 5 Danzo Smasher, 3,160 points. 4 Fry Starlight, 3,450 points. 3 Saris Moonlight, 3,500 points. 2 Snow Lionheart, 5,200 points. 1 Demon Valyrian, 5,250 points. Both of us stared silently at the list. The situation had completely flipped. I was still ranked 4th, even after spending 500 points to find Sansa. Not to mention, I'd done nothing ever since staying with her. But I wasn't the only one. Magnus and Rhaegan, third-year students, had both dropped drastically. A clear sign they were actively searching for me. It was only a matter of time before they reached my location. Sansa was smart too. She had probably figured that much out already. Day 23 was right around the corner. I'll have to start moving soon. I couldn't stay by Sansa's side forever. A single week could flip the rankings completely, especially with the narrowing point gap. I know, but we have to wait for Jessica now, Sansa replied. To gather points efficiently and properly deal with those targeting me, I needed help from the second years. Don't worry, she'll come at the right time. Sansa reassured me, but as I glanced at her, I noticed the dark circles under her eyes too. The atmosphere was completely silent. The rain had stopped some time ago. I know it's a bit late to ask, but don't you sleep? Even I needed rest every now and then, let alone Sansa, whose body was relatively frail. The princess shook her head at the mention. I can't sleep. Not when we don't know what might happen. Her words carried many meanings. You could take it as staying alert in case of a sudden attack. But I vividly remembered that day, when she sleepwalked in that white dress. Just, what is the princess sitting next to me hiding? I had no answer to that. What about you, Fry? How long are you planning to keep playing this staying awake contest with me? I don't know. It's just become a habit. Being on my own for so long had made me constantly alert. But the current situation wasn't something I was used to. You can sleep if you want. I'm always awake anyway. It's fine. No need for that. No. You need to if you want to keep going later. Sansa pulled my head gently and placed it on her lap. I hadn't seen that coming at all. With my head resting on her thigh, much softer than any pillow. I stared up at her with a blank expression. "What are you doing right now?" She looked a little disappointed at my flat reaction, but she didn't seem too bothered. "Takes more than that to rattle me." Instead of focusing on that, she answered my question. "I'm helping you fall asleep. This doesn't help at all. Just close your eyes." With her hand gently covering them, everything turned dark. Her touch was ice cold, yet unbelievably soft, enough to send a chill through my entire body. Lying there like that, the whole situation felt oddly surreal. It was the first time I'd been in such a position here. "I told you, this doesn't help." "Then stop talking already." Seconds passed. Then minutes. Sansa never moved her hand. I couldn't even tell what kind of expression she was making anymore. Adriana had been asleep for a while, so she hadn't seen any of this. If she had, she probably would have intervened by now. My thoughts started to drift. The Victoriad, Aegon, the Third Years, the Moonlight family. There was still so much I had to deal with, so much I needed to do. I couldn't allow myself to rest like this. Couldn't, but little by little, everything fell silent. Sansa smiled softly as she lifted her hand from my eyes. I hadn't even noticed when I lost consciousness, resting on the princess's lap. That night, I had a dream. I saw him, my father. He used to come home exhausted every day. I remembered how he supported me in everything I ever tried to do, no matter how pointless it seemed. Even when I decided to write a completely fictional novel, he never mocked me for it. Instead, he would ask me to tell him about the story I was writing. Even if he had no real interest in it, he always pretended to care. Little things like that meant the world to me. Behind him, my mother, my siblings, everyone I'd ever known. Suddenly, they all began to fade away. I ran after them in a panic, but my legs felt heavy, like I was running through mud. I kept trying to catch up, again and again. "No, don't go. Please, no." Slowly, I returned to reality. Sansa. My memories began to resurface. How I'd fallen asleep on her lap. She was looking at me, eyes wide in surprise. I didn't understand why, until I felt the dampness at the corners of my eyes. "Fry, you." I sat up quickly, wiping my face. Sansa stared at me for a while. Had I been crying? I didn't want to be seen like that, so I tried to brush it off as best I could. How long was I asleep? It was still night. I didn't think I'd been out for long. "It's dawn now. You've been asleep for about 3 to 4 hours. That long?" I frowned, annoyed at myself. How could I let myself fall so easily? "It's fine. At least you look a bit better now." The princess smiled. And just a little, the bags beneath my eyes had eased. I touched my face, trying to get a grip on myself. Sansa stood up. She hadn't slept at all. "It's still early. You can go back to sleep if you'd like." I shook my head instantly. "No. I've had enough. Any more than that, and I'd be crossing a line." I was about to say something to the princess standing before me, but I stopped. She too seemed unsettled. "They're here." Chapter 187, Cursed Power. Fry Starlight POV. I followed Sansa outside. And sure enough, our suspicions were right. We were surrounded. Dozens of students had gathered around us, each one releasing their aura without restraint. So they finally showed up. At the front of them stood Magnus Grell, the same guy I'd faced once before. He looked like he was just about ready to snap. His menacing smile locked onto me. "You finally showed yourself, Starlight." Magnus jumped down from the tree he'd been perched on. He wasn't interested in dragging things out. This farce has gone on long enough. He intended to strike, to end it all in one swift blow. "Magnus Grell." "You'll stop right there." Sansa stepped forward, halting him in his tracks. Magnus frowned the moment he saw her. The same went for the rest of the Third Years. The princess? What was Princess Sansa Valyrian doing with Fry Starlight? That's what crossed the minds of Magnus and his group alike. But their orders were clear. "I have no intention of overstepping, Princess. Please step aside so I may deal with the one standing behind you. He was trying to remain civil as much as possible. Even as a loyalist to Aegon, Magnus knew better than to antagonize the princess. The gap in authority was far too great. Sansa shook her head, holding her ground. You and your men will stand down, Magnus. He's with me. Magnus raised a brow and glanced my way. So not only are you a slippery rat, Starlight, but you've got the nerve to hide behind a woman too? Is that the kind of man you are? A coward hiding beneath the princess's skirt. He had gone through hell trying to find me. Had I not stopped to stay with Sansa, it would have taken him even longer. And now he finds me here, right next to the Imperial Princess. Thinking on it, am I the kind of guy who hides behind a woman when the opportunity arises? I looked at him and smiled. You're absolutely right. That's exactly the kind of person I am. I mean, is he seriously saying this, when he brought an entire army just to hunt me down? I honestly find these kids completely irrational. Bastard! Magnus' rage surged even higher. Even Sansa glanced at me, visibly puzzled by my response. Trying to provoke me would backfire. He'd get nowhere that way. Magnus unleashed his aura. A warning. It was clear he was planning to fight with everything he had, unlike our last encounter with Demon. I stared at the blaze of fire-type aura surging from him. Beside me, Sansa narrowed her eyes at the boy standing before her. Magnus, I told you clearly, stand down. You and everyone with you. Forgive me, princess, but I can't obey that order. Attack Fry Starlight. Finish him off, without laying a hand on the princess. That was probably what he had in mind. With a quick gesture, Rhaegon drew 2 daggers, creeping around from behind. They weren't planning to let me escape. Seeing that they were moments away from attacking, I considered drawing my sword, but Sansa stopped me. I told you, I'll handle this. Are you sure? Using your powers again. I knew how much she suffered because of that ability. It was something usually wielded by the Ultras, but hers was far more intense. It resembled a shadow trait, but it wasn't. It was something entirely different. Something still incomplete. Even I couldn't fully comprehend what it was. Sansa smiled as her shadow began to expand. That power had tormented her for so long. She hated it with every fiber of her being. But at the very least, I can use it in situations like this. Magnus surged forward, cloaked in a terrifying pillar of fire, his fist glowing as he charged straight toward me. He did his best to avoid hitting the princess as he zeroed in on me. At the same time, Rhaegon Zenon silently slipped behind me at high speed, a tank and an assassin. I saw them both coming thanks to Hawkeye's, but I focused more on Sansa. I saw her golden blonde hair fluttering gently. Some strands had already begun to darken into black. That pressure she gave off, it was astonishing. Magnus was right in front of me, a breath away, while Rhaegon was about to strike from behind. But at the very last moment, whoosh, dozens, no, hundreds of tiny black hands appeared from the void, grabbing them both. What the hell is this? They both shouted in unison, frozen in place by the hands. Magnus and Rhaegon struggled to break free, flailing madly, but the shadows held them firm, then slammed them violently into a massive tree, snapping it in half from the impact. Shocked and confused, the two glared at Sansa, stunned by the overwhelming aura she was emitting. Take one more step, and don't blame me for what happens next. With a chilling expression, Sansa stared them down. Even Magnus didn't understand what was going on. Sansa's power wasn't a joke, and it was still growing stronger. He looked at his body for a moment, remembering how she had thrown him like a rag doll. But retreating wasn't an option. It was either this or facing Aegon's wrath. That was far worse. Ready to strike, Magnus gathered his aura and assumed a stance. Sansa saw everything. How he positioned his body. How he funneled aura to his core. She saw it all clearly. Foolish idiot. The princess extended her hand. And the very next moment, boom! An explosion erupted behind Magnus. A terrifying black spear tore through everything in its path, piercing a massive hole through the trees behind him. But just before that, glancing to his side, Magnus finally noticed the severed hand, blood pouring from it in thick streams. His eyes wide with shock. Neither he nor I could process what had just happened. Even with my hawk eyes, which allowed me to see everything clearly, I couldn't track that spear's trajectory at all. And Magnus, he clutched his shoulder in pain, stunned. Magnus. The rest of the third years rushed toward their leader, surrounding him. They slowly backed away, weapons raised at Sansa. But she had already summoned dozens more spears. Let's clean up the trash. She was about to unleash them, but I grabbed her by the shoulder, stopping her. Hey, that's enough. If she released those things, I wasn't sure their armor would hold in time. She might actually kill them. At my words, Sansa grabbed her head and began to steady herself. Her shadow raged violently, letting off pulses of raw aura. The third years backed away quickly, disappearing into the woods. Sansa held on to me tightly as she began to pull her shadow back. Amid the darkness, I saw her struggling to keep the power from spiraling out of control. And after several long minutes, still holding on to me, the princess finally calmed down. She could barely breathe, gripping me as if for dear life. I slowly sat down with her at my side and looked into her face. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. She barely managed the words, but after assessing the situation, I knew I couldn't stay with Sansa any longer. That power of hers, if something like this happened again, it could end in death for all of us. Holding her trembling body in my arms, drenched in sweat, I realized staying here had been the wrong choice. Chapter 188, The Final Days. Fry Starlight's POV. Day 24 of the island trial. I decided to move on my own again. I informed the princess of my decision, and this time she couldn't stop me. Not after what happened last night. Messing with that kind of power any further could bring a disaster down on our heads. Are you sure about this? Jessica hasn't returned yet. Gathering all the second-year students wasn't an easy task. It's fine. The third years won't catch me that easily. At the very least, I'll hold out until Jessica Thivenin shows up. Sansa gave me a slow nod. She looked more exhausted than she had on any previous day. Don't push yourself any more than this, Sansa. You'd be better off withdrawing now. There was no point in her staying on the island any longer. She wouldn't be participating in the finals anyway. It's fine. I'll stay until the end, just in case something happens. She had nerves of steel, I'll give her that. Thank you, Sansa. You really saved me this time. She managed a weak smile as we stood at the tree's entrance. There's no need to thank me. I've simply managed to repay a small part of my debt to you. Debt? Huh? I didn't save you back then expecting anything in return. But if thinking that way brings you peace, then go ahead. I turned around after spending 2 full days with the princess. Until we meet again, then, Sansa. She nodded faintly as she bid me farewell. Yes, take care until then. You too. I leapt away, enveloped in a wave of dark aura. Just a few seconds passed before we were completely out of each other's sight. Sansa remained with Adriana, whose presence was nearly non-existent. She was clearly frightened of the princess now. As for me, the real work started now. I had 6 days left to survive on this godforsaken island. There was no room for retreat now. Strangely enough, time started to pass quickly. Ding! Please proceed to point C4. The notifications were coming in almost constantly now. This time, I was focused entirely on gathering points, to widen the gap between me and the rest of the rankings behind me. I didn't stop. Using the advantage of my SSS-ranked Aura Reserve, I pushed forward without pause. At least I didn't have to worry about exhaustion. Now that we were nearing the final days of the exam, the island had become eerily quiet. I rarely came across other students anymore. All I encountered were nightmare beasts, which I cut down with my blade. Ding! You've reached your destination. Arrival rank 1. Points. +5, base, +20, bonus. As soon as I reached each target location, I would leave immediately, since I was being hunted. I kept moving. I could see the 8-legged lady from where I stood. I had to constantly take her position into account. She might seem distant one moment, then appear right in front of you the next due to her insane mobility. And after hours of non-stop movement, I ran into the third-year students, a squad led by Reagan. He attacked the moment he spotted me, but I escaped instantly. You won't get away. Fry Starlight. So they had split up into teams to track me down faster? That likely meant he'd already sent some sort of signal to Magnus. Engaging him here would have been a foolish move. My best option? Run. Using phantom steps, I surged away, pursued non-stop. Reagan was clearly frustrated. Watching a first-year outrun him like this was clearly getting under his skin. Gripping his dagger by the blade, Reagan concentrated a dense flow of wind aura around it. If I can't catch him, without warning, Reagan hurled the dagger at me with terrifying speed. It spun violently like a massive shuriken, empowered by the swirling wind aura. I hadn't expected Reagan to have a ranged attack like that, so I was just about to dodge, but I didn't need to. The projectile was knocked off course by an unseen force. Everything became clear the moment Jessica Thevenin appeared, accompanied by a large group of students, radiating waves of gravity aura. Second-year students? Reagan was visibly shocked, while I simply grinned and propelled myself away. I'll leave the rest to you guys. I gestured mockingly at Jessica, who still looked less than pleased. She probably wasn't fully convinced about what she was doing, but the princess's orders had been crystal clear. Jessica Thevenin. What's the meaning of this? The second years launched a surprise attack, targeting everyone who had been chasing me. Moody or not, Jessica was at least doing her job properly. From this point on, we won't let any of you touch Fry Starlight. What? Another unexpected variable had appeared in front of the third years. Their pursuit of me always seemed to end like this. What had initially seemed like an easy mission had become a complete nightmare. Reagan cursed and launched an attack. Engage them. Hold the line until Magnus arrives. A violent clash erupted between the second and third-year students. I left the skirmish behind, continuing on my path. The third years were no longer my problem. Day 25 on the island. I was surprised to run into an old friend, the scythe fiend of the Nightmare Land. Seeing that faceless face again stirred a flood of memories. Its eyeless head and those scythe-like limbs. My dear friend had returned to visit me after a long absence. And my dear friend looked best when shredded to pieces. I charged at the scythe fiend with fury. You know, Mr. Scythe, I'm only doing this because I love you. Its head flew off, and only a mutilated corpse remained. That made 10 so far. I still remember the time one of these things tore me apart. My left arm, which became Balerian, ended up like that because of one of them. Can't help but get a little sentimental every time I see one. Day 26 on the island. Ding. Ranking update. 1 Snow Leonhart. 6,000 points. 2. Demon Valerian. 5,950 points. The monster duel continued, neck and neck. You could say they were the main event as the broadcast kept focusing on them, exactly what the audience wanted. Meanwhile, after resuming my point-gathering efforts, 3 Fry Starlight, 4,000 points. 4. Ceres Moonlight, 3,900 points. Ceres was catching up to me. I hadn't seen her face since that day. I wondered how the supposed heroine of my story was faring on her own. Snow was supposed to save her from her family's darkness. But with everything so scrambled now, that clearly wasn't going to happen. She was on her own. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of growth she'd undergo from here. I wished her the best. As long as she didn't get in my way. I pressed on through the island's depths. The score gap between the top 10 was razor thin. Except for Snow and Demon, the remaining 8 were clustered close together. I couldn't afford to stop. Day 27 on the island. Only 3 days left. The battle between the third and second-year students came to an end when I noticed the names shifting on the leaderboard. Apparently, the second-year cohort had been wiped out in an unprecedented incident. Meanwhile, the third years suffered massive damage of their own. The deciding factor was Magnus' injury. Losing his arm left him unable to fight properly. So, even though they technically won, the third-year students were in shambles. Reagan Zenon was eliminated after a tough battle against Jessica Thivenin, who also fell in the process. Over 30 second years were gone. Nearly all of the third years, with the exception of Magnus and a few others, we might even witness the cancellation of the second and third-year finals for the first time ever. I didn't know exactly what had happened, but the spectators had witnessed an epic clash between the temple's elite from the second and third years, a battle that lasted an entire day. And now only 30 students remained on the island. Hard to believe that out of 500 players, this few survived. The path ahead looked clear. Chapter 189, The Moonlight Scheme. Day 28 on the island. 2 days until the end. I was drenched in sweat. The weather had suddenly flipped on the final day, becoming intensely sunny for no apparent reason. I was still dashing around like a madman, slaying nightmare creatures, then capturing the required zones. It had become eerily easy with so few students left. That meant the competition had thinned. Sometimes others would beat me to a spot, and I wouldn't even catch a glimpse of them. I assumed they were either Snow or Demon, or one of the other high-ranked players still fighting for a top 8 seat. Ding! Leaderboard update. 1. Demon Valerian, 6,300 points. 2. Snow Lionheart, 6,240 points. 3. Fry Starlight, 4,300 points. 4. Ceres Moonlight, 4,180 points. 9. Dawn Polaris, 3,500 points. Aside from the first and second place, the rest of us were neck and neck. I had pretty much secured one of the top 8 slots. Just a bit more. I dashed through the towering trees at full speed, aiming for the next target zone. But the way wasn't clear. Out of nowhere, a swarm of nightmare creatures leapt out. Ones I hated facing the most.
De ganado.
They were lying in wait, surrounding me from every direction. I was ready to slice them down and move on. But I didn't have to. Without warning, a blazing inferno ignited above their heads, consuming them all. The way those flames manifested through magical circles, I heightened my senses, scanning the area. That's when I finally felt it. Come out. I turned toward a shadowed nook between the trees. Silence fell for a few seconds. Then the sound of heels tapping against the earth broke the quiet. As she stepped into view, I recognized her instantly. Selena, the young witch who had joined our class not long ago. Hidden beneath her pointed mage's hat, her crimson eyes looked straight at me. It's been a while, Fry. I had almost forgotten about her. The witch who once walked with me through the walls of moonlight. It has been a while. Though should I really call this a coincidence? Selena had clearly prepared that fire spell in advance. So it was hard to believe this meeting was by chance. She didn't deny it.
No.
I was looking for you. The young witch seemed unsettled. And what exactly is the reason? Selena was strong, one of the main heroines, after all. But witches, in general, were vulnerable against someone like me. If she tried anything, I was ready to shut her magic down. Selena froze in place for a moment. She didn't even look at me. Then, without warning, her head lowered.
I'm sorry, Frey.
I truly apologize for everything that's happened, and for what's yet to come. I raised an eyebrow, unsure how to react to her words. Sorry for what exactly? I was confused. But as I thought about it, something clicked. Something about the situation I was in, how everything flipped upside down overnight. Aegon. Selena's expression darkened the moment she heard that name. As for me, it all became clear with a bit of logical thinking. Aegon Valerian never moves unless he's 100% certain. To be that certain, he would have needed someone close to me. But he never came near. The only ones who did were Ceres, Ghost, Danzo, and Selena. The first three were completely out of the question. That left only one. It was you. You were the one who reported me to Aegon. Selena clenched her fist slowly. That's right. I calmly placed my hand on the hilt of my sword, feeling the rough leather of the scabbard. Selena didn't say anything. She looked like she was bracing herself. For a fight, maybe. I didn't need any special ability to know she was battling a storm of thoughts in her head. Her eyes reflected a swirl of conflicted emotion. Fry Starlight, I dragged you into a cycle of suffering that caused you so much pain, and it might still continue. No matter what my reasons were, I can't justify what I did. And what I'm going to do next, following that Dark Prince's orders. If you want to strike me, do it. If you want to cut me down, then go ahead. Maybe then, the guilt crushing my chest will lighten, even a little. Her thoughts were crystal clear to me. But I'm sorry, Selena. That's hypocrisy. So, how did he do it exactly? What? The prince. What did he threaten you with to bring you over to his side? Caught off guard by my composure, Selena didn't know how to respond. Did he hurt you? Or did he take someone from you? Your parents, maybe? I watched her face closely. So, the last one, huh? Aegon was exactly that type of manipulator. Someone who understood human emotions with terrifying accuracy, who could move people like pieces on a board. I walked past the young witch slowly. Selena couldn't accept it. Suddenly, she lost all composure. Why? Why aren't you angry? Why are you acting like it's nothing? I'm the reason for your suffering. Why are you so calm? If you face me like this, then what am I supposed to do? Thinking about it, the girl in front of me and all my classmates, they were just 17-year-old kids. Why don't you attack me? Take your revenge already. Please. The young witch broke into tears. How her parents' lives now hung on the whim of someone more demonic than demons themselves. How she brought so much agony to a boy her own age. Even before all this, she discovered that her respected mentor, Kai Luke, was a traitor. Her old classmates were dead. And now only one person remained. That was a lot for those small shoulders to carry. Too much even. She wanted me to attack her, to curse her, because maybe that would ease the guilt tearing her apart. But I had no intention of doing any of that. Angry? Sorry. But this level of suffering has become part of my daily life. I smiled as I kept walking. I know it's not your fault. I get it. But I don't care. I was never some hero who cared about people's feelings. As long as you stay out of my way, I won't do anything to you. But if you show up again as an enemy, I'll cut you down with everything I have. It's always been that simple. Selena watched my back as I walked away. That back carried burdens far beyond her understanding. Far more than anything she had ever known. Yet it still kept moving forward. How can you bear all of that? It was pressure that defied reason. How can you remain like this when you're thrown into that kind of chaos? In response, I simply smiled at her without saying a word and kept walking. Others might have already broken. The very idea of enduring something like this was madness. But I would endure, because I could, because the ending I was striving for was worth it. That's all there was to it. I vanished between the trees, leaving the confused young witch behind, without an answer. I'd always wondered why her name never showed up on the rankings. Now I knew. Her body was here with us, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Day 29 of the island trial. One day remained. The final moment was drawing near, and a lot was happening beneath the surface. Within a shadowed domain, a girl with white hair and a face bearing faint traces of maturity, one of the third years, lay helplessly. Her eyes had been ripped out, and she cried tears of blood. She screamed in agony, but no one could hear her. Standing before her was Ghost, who had finally reached his limit with every last descendant of the Moonlight family. Filthy spawn, all cut from the same rotten mold. The silent assassin had remained active for the entire 30 days on the island. Ghost had already eliminated more than 30 individuals connected to the plot to kill Fry, all except for Professor Kaiser. The girl in front of him was the last. A killer with terrifying prowess, he left no traces behind. Every death he caused looked like a casualty of the nightmare beasts. His mastery over shadow manipulation allowed him to obscure the island's surveillance broadcasts, keeping every murder hidden from the outside world. That level of precision was terrifying. But Ghost knew something was about to happen, and his unease grew deeper with every secret the Moonlight bloodline tried to bury. He was reaching his breaking point. Gripping the girl by the hair, one of the final remnants of the extremist faction rooted in the Moonlight family, he spoke coldly. Listen carefully to my words, and carve them deep into your mind. He was exhausted from all the blood. I've killed your comrades. The girl sobbed. I've killed countless people. Innocents and bastards like you. His dead eyes bore into her trembling face. I could kill you now, and I could go after your parents next. Your siblings, if you have any. Everything you hold dear in your pitiful life. I'll end it. So the choice is yours. He exhaled sharply, asking the same question for what felt like the 1,000th time. What's your plan? What's going to happen at the end of this trial? How exactly were they planning to strike Fry Starlight? His patience wore thin. The dagger in his hand caressed the girl's neck. As her blood and tears blended into a grotesque mix, the girl finally broke. Please, don't hurt my family. I beg you. We're just avenging those who were wronged. Not what I want to hear.
No.
Stop. I'll tell you. The last of them. Ironically, she was the weakest. And then she started talking. With each word that left her lips, Ghost's expression grew darker. Until, by the time she finished, he cursed out loud. Sons of bitches. Slash. The girl's severed head hit the ground. Ghost emerged from the shadows in a flash, clearly shaken. They're really going that far? All this, for one man. He had to find Fry Starlight. Immediately, before it was too late. Ghost fumbled with his watch. Are you sure you want to spend 500 points to locate another player? He accepted without hesitation. He had to warn him. He had to. Otherwise, Fry would keep walking straight into death. He typed the name hastily. Fry Starlight. But his expression collapsed the moment he saw the result. No player by that name found. It was already too late. Chapter 190. Unveiling the Conspiracy. Fry Starlight's POV. Final day of the island trial. Ding. Ranking update. 1. Demon Valerian. 6,450 points. 2. Snow Lionheart. 6,430 points. 3. Fry Starlight. 4,500 points. 4. Ceres Moonlight. 4,400 points. 5. Danzo Smasher. 3,900 points. 6. Ghost Umbra. 3,880 points. 7. Dawn Polaris. 3,700 points. 8. Ragnacloud. 3,650 points. 9. Magnus Grell. 3,400 points. 10. Clana Starlight. 3,000 points. The final destination will be announced soon. Please reach it within 3 hours to ensure qualification. I stared at the final rankings. You could say everything had already been decided. Demon Valerian, in spectacular fashion, had crowned himself king of this trial after a fierce contest against Snow Lionheart. A battle that thrilled viewers across the world. The month-long trial that imprisoned the students had finally come to an end. Now only one thing remained, reaching the final location announced by the smartwatch. Even though the test technically wasn't over, failing to reach that zone in time meant elimination from the Victoriad. A rather unreasonable rule, and no one truly understood why it existed. But there was no room for complaints now. Ding! Final zone, I-6. Please proceed immediately. It was finally here. The Moonlight extremists hadn't shown up until the very end. And yet, something felt off. As I moved between the trees, unease crept through me. Could it really end like this? Could they truly stay quiet all the way to the end? I didn't know. With mixed thoughts, I made my way toward the final zone. Obstacles had always stood in my way. Since the moment I arrived in this world, I'd been trapped in a spiral of chaos, forced to face enemies far beyond my level. That pressure crushed me like an insect. But I fought back, and now I had made it this far. The finish line was in sight. I could see it in the distance. Just a little more, and I'd be there. Step by step, Fry Starlight moved toward the end. Elsewhere on the island, Ghost was also running, searching for him. He was the only one who noticed. Fry Starlight hadn't shown up on the player tracking list since the final day, which meant finding him now was nearly impossible. Fry hadn't left the trial, he was still ranked. But none of that would matter if he didn't reach the final destination in time. Ghost knew what he was doing was hopeless, but he still tried to find him. "Damn it!" the assassin shouted. Somewhere else entirely, Aegon strolled alone across the golden shore. The prince had never intended to qualify in this trial. There was no point in doing so if his sister wasn't going to either. And he had no interest in participating in a losing match against monsters like Snow and Demon. From the start, Aegon had never planned to be one of the final 8. He glanced at his watch with a smile as the final notification arrived. "So it's time, huh?" A light chuckle escaped him as he thought of the grand finale he had prepared. After the recent infiltration incident of the Ultras, the Imperial family had gained almost full control over the temple. And amidst that shift, Aegon had obtained new authority. Authority that allowed him to meddle as he pleased. "Oh, dear Fry, I hope you enjoy my final gift to you." Sending the third-year students and orchestrating all that pressure from the very start hadn't been the real play. Aegon knew Fry would survive it all. Anything less would have disappointed him. He understood all the pieces on the board. Just as he knew who they held dear, he also knew their enemies. "This is it, Fry. If you survive this, I'll acknowledge you as a player equal to me." Aegon smiled as he stared at his watch. "Otherwise, you'll die here," written clearly on his screen. "Please proceed to the final area, D9. Everyone was now on the move, each heading to complete their destined trial. Elsewhere, Phoenix Sunlight stood watching the Lady of 8 Legs. As he continued to observe the grotesque creature, a message from the headmaster finally arrived. "It's done. Phoenix, that nightmare abomination has fulfilled its purpose." The Lady of 8 Legs had only been a test subject, meant to give the players a taste of what it meant to face enemies like her. Her role was now over. Phoenix remained silent, waiting for the next command. "You may kill it now." At last, Phoenix nodded. "Understood." He leapt into the air, spreading both arms wide. Flames of eternity. From his hands, a ferocious blaze erupted, circling around the Lady of 8 Legs in a massive inferno. The ignition was nearly instant. The beast didn't even understand how she had ended up trapped in flames. She screamed and lunged to break through the fire encasing her, but it was no use. Those flames were terrifying in both intensity and spread. Phoenix hovered high above her, his eyes locked on the creature below. "From the start, I've always despised nightmare spawn like you." His fist burned with blinding heat. From a distance, he looked like a radiant star. Sensing danger from above, the lady launched all 10 of her limbs skyward to crush the threat. Her venomous limbs were massive and terrifyingly strong. But Phoenix didn't bother dodging, he simply struck. With eyes glowing with violent light, he called out, "Burn!" In that moment, boom! The entire island trembled. All the players saw it from afar. A cascade of fire pouring down from the heavens. An endless flame devoured the lady's limbs without pause, then carved its path straight toward her head. She attempted to regenerate over and over within the relentless blaze, but it was futile. "To kill rapidly regenerating creatures like you, I need to strike faster than you can heal." The flames refused to die down. The Lady of 8 Legs was being charred into a lump of coal right before their eyes, screaming all the while. It would have been a different story had the real Lady of 8 Legs been here. But sadly, You're not on my level. Took no more than 3 minutes. After that, nothing remained but ash. With a snap of his fingers, the flames vanished completely, leaving behind a massive black crater. Phoenix stared at it briefly before disappearing. His job was done. Phoenix's final act stunned the players watching from across the island. But their awe didn't last long. Soon enough, each of them returned to what they were doing. One by one, they began heading toward the final rendezvous point. The first to arrive was Demon Valerian. Then the others followed. The 3-hour window hadn't closed yet, so they continued to arrive steadily. First years, Ceres, Danzo, Ragna, each of them showed up. Snow was already there. Eventually, the last to arrive was Ghost. He looked around the clearing, but he didn't find him. Fry Starlight was missing. Some had already noticed his absence. Danzo, Sansa, even Snow. 2 hours remained before the deadline. Most wondered where Fry was, but none of them knew the truth. Ghost was the only one who did. He remembered the words of that girl. With the prince's help, the extremist faction managed to tamper with the rules of the exam. The final rule had been added, the one that forced players to gather at a specific zone or be disqualified. That rule had a purpose: to lure Fry Starlight. The plan was simple. On the final day, Fry would be given a false coordinate on his watch. At the same time, the search function for him would be disabled for other players. The final zone he received was completely fake. Fry would be isolated far from every other participant. A place where no one could see him and no one could hear him. And that's where the curtain would fall. The trap had been set from the beginning, so meticulously, so precisely, that Fry would fall right into it no matter what. Chapter 191, One-Sided Battle. 1 hour before the current events. Fry Starlight's POV. I was running fast, closing in on my destination bit by bit. Tension and anticipation were building inside me, my heart nearly bursting from how violently it beat. I wasn't used to this kind of eerie calm. Step by step, I moved closer to where I needed to be. Pushing my body further and further, I finally broke through the forest and found myself walking along golden sands. I slowed down, carefully scanning the area around me. There were no students. The place was completely empty. I was alone, but that wasn't quite true. As I moved deeper in, approaching what I thought was the end, the heat inside my chest rose, and every hopeful thought in my head instantly evaporated. Because I saw them. A man in a sharp black suit and glasses, standing beside a bald, muscular old man with a thick white beard. Both radiated pressure on the level of an S rank or possibly even higher. Somehow I recognized them. Kaiser. The Professor Ghost once warned me about. You finally arrived, Fry Starlight. I was wondering how long you planned on making us wait. I stared at them with a blank expression, then glanced at my wristwatch. Said I was in the correct zone. Or at least it should have. No need to look so shocked. Did you really think you'd get away? Fake coordinates? Indeed. Kaiser confirmed my suspicions as the numbers on my watch suddenly shifted. Final area, D9. It wasn't I6. That meant the actual final area was on the complete opposite side of the island. I clenched my fists tightly, realizing how perfectly this trap had been set. Even now, they refused to stop toying with me. You don't know how long I've waited for this moment. To finally avenge the tragedies you brought upon my family, Kaiser growled. Unlike the calm old man beside him, Kaiser was all rage. He didn't even try to hide his emotions. I looked at him with thinly veiled frustration. You really believe I'm the one behind that? A chilling frost aura swelled around him, pushing against my shoulders. The Ultras are just rabid dogs, biting anyone in their path. But I'm not after them. I want the one who unleashed them into my house. And that's supposed to be me? Kaiser was one of those people, utterly convinced I was the root of all misfortune since the incident with Ceres. That shallow way of thinking. Just looking for the nearest person to blame. Pathetic. Let's see what you're hiding, Fry Starlight. A demonic contract? Something worse, perhaps? Go ahead and reveal it, it won't matter. The only thing waiting for you now is death. 2S-class enemies. Even if I had a demonic contract, I wouldn't win. And Kaiser knew that full well. With a crooked smile, I raised my sword with my right hand, the one I'd been training to wield the blade with lately. Seems like all the Moonlights really do have filth packed in their skulls if this is how they think. It's always the same, obstacles stacking up in front of me, over and over again, like someone's deliberately placing them. And now, 2S-class instructors? This world just can't stop messing with me. I've got barely 3 hours. If I don't break through these bastards and reach the real final zone in time, I'll lose the Victoriad and be disqualified. Just when I was about to reach the end, a wall like this appeared. I tossed my sword into the air, my eyes flaring with a terrifying glint as I glared at the two. They'd already cut off my escape route. Running wasn't an option. Even trying would be suicide. It'd mean turning my back on them. Seeing me toss the sword, Kaiser raised a brow. Accepted your fate? In response, I fired a question of my own. To kill me, you must have lured me here in secret, right? Without anyone else knowing. Kaiser said nothing. There was no point in answering the obvious. If they couldn't show the world my death by their hands, the broadcast must not cover this area. No one would witness what was about to happen here. If that was the case, come, Valerian. I extended my left hand. Dark aura surged violently as the instructors stared at me with growing interest. And when that cursed black sword appeared, my aura spiked drastically. A sword. But not just any sword. Take my blood, Valerian. There was no point in trying to fight them normally. The difference in level was simply overwhelming. To even have a chance, I had to go all in from the very beginning. Blood form. Valerian trembled violently, draining a massive amount of my blood alongside the SSS-grade aura dormant inside my body. Pain exploded through every nerve. This state would tear my body apart, forcefully drawing out every ounce of strength I had left. Without hesitation, I activated my passive skill, Ascension, to withstand the excruciating pain and remain sane. My eyes lit up with a violet glow as my body became engulfed in dark aura pressure. Both Kaiser and the other instructor looked visibly shaken as they felt the intensity of power pouring out of a mere Class C student. So this is the power that let him survive that day. They were both thinking the same thing. What are you two standing there for? Gawking like idiots? I stabilized the pressure of blood form, bracing myself for battle. I could only maintain this state for 15 minutes at most. Don't you want me dead? I'm the one who caused all your tragedies, right? Then come and get me. I barely managed to survive against Frost Moonlight when he was only Class S-. And now, I was facing 2 full Class S instructors. My chances were painfully low. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after coming this far. No matter what it costs, I will defeat them. I will survive. And I will keep going until the very end. Boom! The catastrophe began. Kaiser appeared in front of me with insane speed. Frost aura gathered around his fist as he launched a devastating punch toward me. His blow clashed against Valerian's surface, unleashing a shockwave that kicked up a storm of sand around us. Meanwhile, the older instructor was already behind me. He unleashed a barrage of strikes with terrifying physical power, hundreds of punches in mere seconds. I dodged like a madman, but some of them still clipped my back. Felt less like fists and more like being rammed by a truck. And Kaiser, he didn't relent. Pinned between them, I barely blocked or dodged their blows. Warning signals flared through my body. I took a deep breath. Ascension sharpened my focus completely. I cut away every unnecessary movement and pushed my limits. Even so, I was still getting pounded mercilessly. There's no point resisting. You're dead either way. They weren't instructors at the temple for nothing. Grinding my teeth, I unleashed a wave of dark aura in an arc to push them back. I couldn't afford to just take hits anymore. I needed to fight. I ignited the power of 10,000 steps of shadow. I launched a surge of dark aura at Kaiser, who responded by forming a massive block of ice. My aura slammed into his, the elements clashing and trying to devour one another. Kaiser had successfully blocked my attack. But from the side, the old instructor struck with a flying kick. I was a second too late to react, and it sent me crashing through the sand. And it didn't end there. Ice spears rained down on me from above, giving me no time to breathe. My hand moved with inhuman speed, shattering every single spear with Valyrian. But the assault didn't stop. I didn't even notice when my legs had frozen in place, too focused on defending. Kaiser's ice had restricted my movement perfectly, and just as I staggered, the old man struck, his timing impeccable. It was a flawlessly coordinated attack. Crack! I spat out a disgusting amount of blood as his frenzied punch smashed into my face. The pain was unbearable. My frostbitten wounds kept getting worse with every second. I retaliated by unleashing a flurry of dark slashes toward the old man in front of me. We clashed violently. From a distance, it looked like a blur of blazing fists crashing into arcs of dark aura. We pushed each other back. I managed to land a few hits, but his body was built like a tank. His wounds were shallow, easily endurable for someone with an S-rank physique. As for me, only a single minute had passed, and I was already in a horrifying state. But the worst part? This wasn't a one-on-one fight. Kaiser came at me from the side with a massive ice greatsword. I twisted my body just in time, but not fast enough. The freezing blade sliced deep into my side, leaving a bloody gash. Kaiser didn't stop there. He conjured a giant hammer and tossed it straight into his partner's hands. With surgical precision, the old man brought the hammer down on my wounded side. Boom! I was sent flying into the forest, crashing through tree after tree like a ragdoll. And still, they didn't let up. They flew after me immediately. It was in that moment, amidst the brutality of their combined assault, that I finally understood what it meant to face two S-rank monsters head-on. I crawled slowly, using the glowing Valyrian to support myself as I got back on my feet. Ha ha! Each breath was a struggle. Blood streamed from my nose and mouth without pause. My vision was a blur of red, my face so drenched and broken that even my hawk eyes struggled to focus. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a massacre even while using blood form. Kaiser and his partner were closing in. I won't lose. I clenched my teeth. Victory was just ahead of me. The Victoriad was still within reach. I won't lose, I roared, unleashing a violent surge of dark aura in their direction. Sharpening my aura along the edge of my blade, I fired a massive arc of pure destruction, one that carved through the forest and launched trees skyward. And again, and again. Hundreds of black slashes tore through everything, turning the surroundings into scattered debris. But even after all that chaos, they were still standing. Pointless. My defenses shattered in a single moment. The old giant grabbed my face and slammed it into the ground. With his other fist, he drove blow after blow into my body, trying to bury me in the dirt. I barely managed to wedge Valyrian between us to absorb some of the impact. But his arm moved like a machine gun, locking me into an endless barrage of strikes. Bit by bit, my consciousness began to fade. Boom! 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 I lay in a massive crater, vision flooded with red, unable to see anything but that enormous fist, slamming into me again and again. The sound of bones shattering, flesh being pulverized, blood splattering through the air. Everything went crimson. And the awareness I'd preserved through ascension was slowly slipping into the dark. Chapter 192, Until Death. The nightmare creatures had fled, and all signs of life had withdrawn from that region. The ground trembled violently with every strike. Holding down the young man who hadn't even lived a quarter of his life, the old man relentlessly slammed him into the earth. The sheer amount of blood pouring out of Frey's body was enough to stain the old man as well. Kaiser stood behind, dozens of ice spears primed, ready to react to any sudden movement. From the way the old man felt his opponent crumble, he assumed it was over. Frey hadn't moved an inch. For a moment, the old man paused, observing the broken youth in his grasp. Amid the heat from the battle and the warm blood soaking him, his senses were fully awakened. Together with Kaiser, they had brought down their target in under 5 minutes. Fry Starlight should be dead by now. But the old man's eyes widened when he realized that the cursed black sword had pierced straight through his chest and emerged from his back. His face darkened as he pulled himself away, while Kaiser shouted and unleashed all his spears at Fry Starlight. Boom! The spears exploded into Frey's body. The old man retreated beside Kaiser. Both stared at the gash in his chest that forced him to one knee. Kane, your injury? Kaiser asked, clearly concerned. It's fine, Kane replied, rising after halting the bleeding. No vital organs were hit. His body was incredibly tough. An injury like that wouldn't kill him. But what left Kane unsettled wasn't the injury. It was how Fry had managed to strike during all that chaos. The damage Fry had endured wasn't survivable. It was beyond human limits. There was no way he could have stayed conscious, let alone strike at the perfect opening. From within the shattered ice spears, Fry Starlight crawled out. The professors stared in disbelief. One eye barely open, his entire body drenched in blood and wrecked beyond recognition. His right arm hung uselessly. The only limb he could still move was the one holding Balerion. This is impossible. Both of them watched in shock. These weren't wounds anyone could withstand. Fry didn't care what they thought. Dark aura surged again around his blade as he launched a wide-range slash that swept toward both of them. Kaiser managed to summon a massive wall of ice just in time. Meanwhile, Kane charged again. Fine. I'll break you again. Only harder this time. He clashed into Fry, sending them both flying as they shattered everything in their path. Aura erupted violently around Kane's fists, while Fry countered with waves of dark slashes. Both took hits, but Frey's injuries were on another level. After the endless blows and those hellish projectiles from Kaiser, Fry bled more than he ever had. Against that kind of pressure, a normal person would have died a dozen times over. But he was still standing. What the hell is your damn body made of? 7 minutes had passed since the battle began. Kane himself was starting to pant from the sheer effort it took to pummel this boy. What is going on here? By the god Sake? Fry was still on his feet, still fighting. At this level, Kane had taken some solid hits himself. It didn't make sense. Not only had Fry survived everything thrown at him, he still had enough awareness to retaliate, to strike at the exact right moments, and to exploit every weakness. Kane stepped back, and Kaiser moved to his side. Let's finish him together, Kaiser said. Kane nodded. Fry now looked more like a zombie than a human. Kaiser conjured twin ice blades and lunged forward with Kane. Fry found himself attacked from both sides. But even through all the blows and the butchering, his mind was razor sharp. With one blood-soaked eye barely open, he stared through the haze of crimson. At his enemies, at the battlefield, at the carnage. His thoughts were clear. He wouldn't allow himself to fall unconscious. Not until the very end. I had a dream of days long past, days when I still had a family, a dream of a life that once felt perfect. Every time I see them there on the other side, Fry whispered faintly beneath the weight of relentless strikes. I don't want it to be just a dream anymore. Why had he fought this far? Why did he keep going, despite every obstacle and hardship? Why endure this hell? All of it, just to turn that dream into reality. Amid the savage blows, Fry began to retaliate. What? Both men were stunned to see him fighting back. That broken body of his, still clinging to Balerion, swinging with everything he had. How many injuries had he suffered along the way? How many cuts and tears had devoured that slender frame? Ever since the nightmare incident, Frey's body left no scars. His skin appeared pristine. But it was a lie. That body had been shredded countless times. This pain, this suffering. The dark aura surged again, clashing with their own head-on. How many times do you think I've been through this hell? This level of pain, it wasn't enough to shake him. He had lived through it too often, it had become familiar. No matter how many wounds he took, Fry would keep fighting. Until death. Unless death claimed him, he would never lower his sword. He had come this far, he wouldn't fall. He wouldn't stop, even if his entire world was turned upside down. 3 silhouettes moved with blinding speed. Kane, empowered by Earth aura that reinforced his body. Kaiser, slashing with twin ice blades. All met with the blade of Balerion. The 3 clashed in a brutal close-range brawl, unleashing shockwaves in every direction. Don't stop. Kill him. Even at this level, they weren't unscathed. Fry wasn't the only one taking hits. But the difference between the injuries they sustained and the destruction Fry endured was staggering. 9 minutes. Only 1 minute left in the blood form. Frey's enemies intensified their assault. Against a monster like him. A fighter who felt no pain, who kept striking with a ruined body and that cursed black blade that carved through them. The only way to stop him was to destroy him completely. The will of Fry Starlight left them in awe. What kind of resolve made someone keep fighting under conditions like this? What kind of will pushed you forward through hell? But will alone was one thing. The human body was another. Finally, Fry staggered, spitting out a mouthful of blood. That white hair of his now stained crimson, along with the rest of his mangled body and shattered armor. The auto-defense of his gear had long since failed, and the teleportation enchantments had never activated. No help would come. The area had been sealed completely, no aura could escape. He was truly alone. In the middle of it all, Fry gasped for air. His broken body collapsed to the ground, yet he clung to Balerion. On his knees, leaning on his greatsword, his only companion. Before him stood his enemies, injured as well. He had struck them, cut them, marked them. Their blood had stained the battlefield too, even if most of it was his. In the midst of all that carnage, it was over. His body could no longer fight. And those instructors, they knew it. No words of mockery came from their mouths. They had witnessed the impossible. As warriors, they felt only awe for the boy who hadn't even turned 18. There was one thing they wanted now. To kill him as quickly as possible. Fry glanced at his sword. Any second now, the 10-minute limit would end. He had reached his limit, used everything he had. Balerion, please, he whispered faintly. To the very last drop. His enemies would kill him. So, take it all. His skin began to crack open, revealing glowing violet veins of terrifying aura. The crimson lines across Balerion shifted, turning deep purple, as a crushing pressure erupted into the air. A force so overwhelming, it made both Kaiser and Kane's expressions darken in dread. What the? This aura pressure. It was pure madness. Fry was preparing his final strike. A skill he had crafted himself. A move that mimicked a nuclear detonation. The concept was simple. Detonate his body to unleash an ocean of SSS rank aura in one final apocalyptic attack. But such a move would obliterate him entirely. So instead of his body, he transferred everything into his sword, Balerion. Using his body as a conduit and the blade as the vessel, it became possible. Kaiser and Kane lunged to stop him immediately, but an explosion of dark aura blasted them away. That aura, it was unnatural. Balerion was devouring the ocean of aura, its presence distorting the very air. The pathways of Frey's aura circuits were torn apart just from the sheer force being funneled. Fry grit his teeth, enduring the searing pain. He had once failed to unleash this move, when stopped by Baylor Moonlight, who stood at SS rank. But this time, it was stronger, so much stronger. He wouldn't be able to fight after this, his body would be completely done. But he would make sure of one thing. They would not walk away. I'll erase you from existence. To Kaiser and Kane, it no longer felt like they were facing Fry Starlight, but a reaper, a dark wraith thirsting for their souls. Something inhuman, something incomprehensible. The power he had gathered was no bluff. It was so immense. Both men turned and tried to flee. But it was already too late. Fry closed his eyes, completely enveloped in the sea of dark aura. Everything was unleashed in that one moment. Ignition. And with it, the strongest weapon in Fry Starlight's arsenal was finally released. Chapter 193. The End of the Trial. On the other side of the island, the remaining students had gathered at the final location. Only 28 had managed to survive until the end. Everyone was present except for one. "Where's Fry?" Danzo asked, his eyes scanning the group. An hour had already passed. With growing concern, he turned to Ghost, who stood nearby, his expression unusually grim. The best thing Ghost could do at this point was inform the instructors of what was happening. But he didn't even know who was friend or foe anymore. Phoenix. He had to find him. Phoenix Sunlight was a proud and upright presence, someone who would never stoop to such deception. But that, in itself, was a problem. There were only students in the area now. No instructors in sight. Not even one. Ghost tried to think of a way to locate Phoenix, but Danzo interrupted him. "Ghost, what's going on? Where's Fry?" Ghost let out a frustrated breath. "There's no time to explain. We need to find Phoenix. Now." "What? If we don't, he'll die." Danzo froze, stunned by the words. "Fry Starlight is going to die," Ghost declared. At that very moment. "What are you talking about?" Snow Lionheart appeared beside them, his senses having already picked up on the conversation. "Fry Starlight is going to die?" He wasn't the only one who heard it. Even the princess, standing at a distance, froze in place. She turned sharply toward the one she knew was responsible. Aegon. The prince stood among the remaining first and third-year students, smiling as if nothing were wrong. But the princess knew the truth, that beneath his skin was something far darker. Fry Starlight was going to die, and if he did, the reason was standing right there in front of her. Her eyes darkened, a shadowy aura beginning to swirl around her. With silent fury, the dark figure of a girl began to walk toward the prince. Elsewhere, Phoenix Sunlight stood calmly while instructors remained hidden nearby, cloaking their presence. They were close to the students, but none had sensed them. Phoenix's eyes swept the area, hyper-aware of everything in his domain. Yet something felt wrong, as if something was happening behind his back. Abraham's sun didn't show. Had he been eliminated? It was possible. No matter how much Phoenix spread his aura across the island, he couldn't sense him. Had the son of the man he respected so deeply truly fallen like this? His mind locked onto one name. Fry. Meanwhile, the other instructors finally noticed something. Both Kaiser Moonlight and Kane Moonlight were missing. Something was definitely happening, and everyone was right. Ghost, who hesitated to explain the truth to Snow. The princess, ready to strike Aegon. Phoenix, extending his aura restlessly in search of just one person. All of them froze. The earth trembled as if it were crying out in pain. A great quake rocked the entire island beneath their feet. Students fell to the ground in panic. Everyone turned instinctively toward the same direction. And when they did, mouths fell open, eyes widened in horror. Even the instructors stood stunned by what they saw. Far away, on the opposite end of the island, a towering black pillar of destructive aura pierced the sky. The amount of aura overflowing from that place was pure madness. It mirrored the blazing inferno Phoenix had once unleashed, but this time, it was even more violent. A skill in the SS rank had been released, Ignition, channeled through a sword that was also SS ranked, fueled by a seemingly infinite ocean of SSS tier aura. The result was terrifying. The ground quaked violently before gradually calming again. Everyone stood frozen in awe, stricken by the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. What was that? What kind of being could unleash such a strike? A nightmare creature? Person? Even the prince looked unsure as he stared at the sky-tearing aftermath. But Phoenix Sunlight didn't hesitate. The ground beneath him exploded as he shot toward the source at a speed that defied logic. His eyes blazed with intensity as he erased the distance in just a few steps. so fast that the other instructors only caught a glimpse of his back as he vanished. Phoenix's mind raced to piece together what had happened. An intruder? Someone tampering with the trial? That earlier attack suggested a battle had occurred, one completely hidden from his senses. And if it was an intruder, Phoenix was more than ready to deal with it.
Moments later.
He arrived, and what he saw left him stunned. The beach had vanished, completely evaporated, along with a massive portion of the sea around it. Waves were slowly crawling into the void left behind by the devastating impact, filling the gaping crater left by that strike. Nothing was spared, not the trees, not the ground itself. With his enhanced perception, Phoenix scoured the area, trying to locate the source of the catastrophe. Then he sensed it. The faint presence, barely there. Someone on the brink of death. That was what confused Phoenix the most. Only one presence. He dashed forward, and when he arrived, he saw a boy dragging himself across the scorched earth. His legs could no longer carry him. His right arm was shattered beyond use. Only the left arm remained, barely functioning. Phoenix stepped closer, and upon closer inspection, he recognized the face. Fry Starlight. The boy barely opened one eye. His body was so mangled that bone pierced through flesh. His aura pathways had been torn apart by sheer overload. The extent of the injuries, even Phoenix found himself shaken by the sight. He instinctively reached out, offering a hand to help. But Frey's left hand slapped it away. What? Phoenix was stunned. Fry hadn't even looked at him. He just kept crawling, alone. Following the trail his blood had painted behind him, Phoenix quickly realized where he was going. He was heading toward the final rendezvous point. Despite everything, he refused help, because assistance from an instructor would disqualify him from the trial and the Victoriade. In that condition, he was still trying to finish the test. Phoenix's thoughts spun into a storm. That earlier explosion, and now this. Fry alone, shredded, crawling. What the hell happened? No matter how hard he tried, Phoenix couldn't form a coherent scenario. But there was one thing he knew for sure. Fry wouldn't make it. Not with a body like that. The boy had already lost consciousness. His body was dragging itself forward as if moved by sheer will alone. Phoenix shut his eyes tightly. The other instructors would arrive at any moment now. And so, he made his decision. On the other side of the island, the students had gathered, still stunned by what had happened moments ago. That massive explosion. It was a phenomenon their minds couldn't fully comprehend. Only Ghost had the faintest idea of what might have been happening, because he knew a fragment of Frey's true capabilities. But even for him, it was too much. Even he felt his head go blank after witnessing that detonation. The question now was what happened to Fry? And then, a few seconds later, a man appeared among the students like a phantom. The students recoiled at first, startled, but their tension faded once they recognized him. It was Phoenix. In his arms, he carried someone. Slowly, he lowered the young man onto the grass. As they got a better look, confusion swept across the group. Some couldn't even bring themselves to look. Drenched in blood, Fry Starlight lay there, unmoving. Sansa covered her mouth in shock at the sight. So did Ghost. Danzo. Even Snow. Phoenix placed a hand on Frey's chest, checking one last time. He had done everything he could, used his own aura to treat the boy. And though Frey's life was now out of danger, the injuries were no joke. Phoenix didn't know what that boy had endured, what hell he had gone through, but at the very least, rest now, Fry Starlight. You made it. Chapter 194. Preliminaries Results. The young man closed his eyes, distancing himself, if only briefly, from the hell he'd endured. The students gathered around Fry Starlight, casting silent glances at him. Some couldn't bear the sight for long and quickly looked away. Others stared with a mix of sympathy, and some with complete confusion. His injuries were grotesque. His bones jutted out, and his internal organs were partially visible. Among them, two girls stepped forward. Phoenix noticed them immediately. Stay where you are. At his command, Clanna Starlight and Amelia Adderix froze in place. Ah, we only want to help. I'm family with Fry. Seeing the troubled girl shaken by Frey's state, and the frightened girl trailing behind her, Phoenix recognized a familiar aura. Oliora, are you from the church, by any chance? Startled by his question, Amelia flinched. Phoenix's overwhelming presence made her nervous, but she still stammered her answer. Why yes, I'm the Saintess candidate from year 1. Can help him. Her voice lacked confidence. After all, she had never seen someone so broken before. Very well then. Phoenix stepped aside, allowing her to proceed. Clanna stood behind her, watching in distress. Thanks to their teamwork, the two had managed to survive thus far. As Amelia channeled her healing power into Frey's body, her expression darkened. She closed her eyes tightly, horrified by what she discovered. His body? How is he even still alive? The extent of his injuries was absurd. It was difficult to find a single unscathed spot. She poured her aura into him, doing her best, but even she couldn't do much, especially for his destroyed aura pathways. She had heard of warriors damaging their pathways from overusing their powers, but in Frey's case it was like trying to push an elephant through the eye of a needle. I can heal his external wounds, but his aura pathways. Her tone shifted. Gone was her usual childish demeanor, replaced with cold seriousness. I don't think he'll ever be able to fight again. Phoenix said nothing. He had already come to the same conclusion. Fry Starlight's body wouldn't be able to endure another battle. He knew that. But he didn't want to accept it, not yet. At least for now, he wanted to honor the resolve of the boy who had crawled through hell just to finish the exam. That night, everyone present was left with far more questions than answers. The massive explosion that shook the entire island. Fry Starlight's near-death state. People like Demon Valerian didn't care what happened to Fry. Their minds never connected him to that explosion. It was something they saw as far beyond him. If he can't fight anymore, then that's his limit. With those words, Demon walked off, followed by the other students, one by one. Ghost's mind was blank as he stared at the collapsed figure before him. Once, the silent assassin had chosen Fry Starlight as his light. He wanted to be his shadow, for the brighter the light, the darker the shadow that followed. But now that light had dimmed. No, perhaps it had been extinguished entirely. Had he made the wrong choice? Was picking Fry over the likes of Snow and Demon just foolishness? Or maybe he was the one unworthy of being Frey's shadow. He no longer knew. And unlike those who pitted him, Prince Aegon watched with a different emotion. Kaiser and Kane Moonlight were dead. Erased, really. Even the tools he had provided them with weren't enough to save them. But Fry Starlight was still alive. Aegon placed his hand over his face, trying to hide the twisted expression growing on it. How? How did he survive? What happened? The prince had imagined countless scenarios, yet not a single one of them had come true. Did someone help him from the shadows? Unlikely. Aegon had prepared far too well for such interference. This was supposed to be checkmate. At best, he expected Fry to escape with his life. But he hadn't run. He'd killed his opponents. Aegon felt something strange. For the first time, he didn't understand. He stood before a question mark, blank and immense. Even if Fry was most likely crippled now, that boy had won. And worse, Aegon didn't even know how. The prince turned and walked away, angry for the first time in a long, long time. Final rankings, Island Trial. 1. Demon Valerian, 6,450 points. 2. Snow Lionheart, 6,430 points. 3. Fry Starlight, 4,500 points. 4. Ceres Moonlight, 4,400 points. 5. Danzo Smasher, 3,900 points. 6. Ghost Umbra, 3,880 points. 7. Dawn Polaris, 3,700 points. 8. Ragna Cloud, 3,650 points. 9. Magnus Grell, 3,400 points. 10. Clanna Starlight, 3,000 points. The official qualifiers had finally been decided. Demon Valerian won the island trial after an intense duel with Snow Lionheart. But the son of Ivar found no joy in his victory. Instead, he exchanged a silent look with Snow. "We'll settle this properly in the next round." That battle-hardened pride of his wouldn't rest until he'd defeated Snow in a true head-to-head. Snow, still disturbed by the sight of Frey's broken body earlier, responded with a golden aura surging around him. "Don't worry, I'll make sure to shatter that pride of yours." The qualifiers had ended, but the crowd was now eager for the true beginning. The main event of the Victoriad elimination rounds. The most anticipated phase. Battles held before their very eyes on a grand stage. The public, who had only seen what Ivar allowed them to see, remained blind to the truth. They had no idea about what truly happened on that island. They didn't know about the dark side of the exam that had claimed the lives of so many students. While the overall numbers fell within expected casualties, the number of permanent injuries was unusually high. In contrast, the exam held for the upper years had gone far better. Where only 28 students out of 500 from the first 3 years survived, over 100 passed from the 4th through 6th years. As for the top rank, it was claimed by the student council president, Ellen White, who earned an absurd 9,000 points. Having already won the Victoriad 5 times, she now stood one step away from matching Phoenix Sunlight's record, on the path toward her 6th star. These headlines dominated the spotlight, and like that, a full day passed. A day in which the students were finally returned to safety. Among them, Fry Starlight remained unconscious, lying among the many injured. Phoenix Sunlight had personally shielded him from the public eye, allowing him to escape unwanted attention. For now, many of the instructors were left bewildered by what had transpired. Thankfully, the idea that someone as weak as Fry Starlight could be tied to such a disaster seemed far-fetched. To make matters worse, 2 temple professors had died under mysterious circumstances. Many of the sharpest minds had reached the same conclusion, that they were erased by that previous explosion. Between this and that, the case was quietly closed with no clear answers. And at long last, the countdown had begun. Chapter 195, Quarterfinal Draw. 1 week until the finals. With less than 7 days remaining before the start of the quarterfinals, Fry Starlight was still unconscious, trapped inside a body no longer capable of proper combat. The moment they returned to the temple, the Starlight family immediately took him into custody. After successfully seizing control of the Starlight household with Carmen's help, Ada thought things would finally settle down. Even though Leonidas Starlight had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, the family now bowed to her authority. But once again, she was hit with devastating news. Her brother had fallen into another coma. For 3 days and nights, Ada poured every resource and healer the Starlight family had into helping him. Standing outside the treatment room alongside Carmen, the 2 women watched the young man lying inside, his body hooked up to dozens of wires and tubes, still unconscious. "This is strange," Ada muttered quietly. Carmen's sharp hearing picked up her voice. "What's strange?" Ada's thoughts drifted to the not-so-distant past. Last time, Fry was in a coma for over a month, making us think he might never wake up. The aftermath of the curse back then had taken him for far too long. And as soon as he woke up, it was only a few days before he returned to the temple. Now he's fallen into another. She clenched her fists. This time, it might be permanent. What if next time he returned to her as a corpse, without anyone knowing how or why he died? They said it was an attack by nightmare creatures. That was the temple's official story. But what kind of nightmare creature could cause injuries like these? It made no sense. Faced with such a situation, Ada couldn't help but wonder, what was the right move now? As dark thoughts clouded her mind, Carmen's hand settled on her shoulder. "Ada, don't do anything reckless." The family has just barely stabilized after everything. It was far too early to make any major move, not when their foundation was still this fragile. But there's no need to worry. Your brother, he's a lot like him. That's why I'm certain. He'll wake up any moment now. Fry Starlight had already shown them miracles. Miracles that defied reason and broke through the impossible. In that way, he was very much like his father, Abraham Starlight. It was hard to imagine that young man losing to something like this. In that sense, Carmen Starlight believed in him. She wouldn't have accepted him as her master otherwise. Elsewhere, Ada continued staring at her brother's face, seeing how fragile he looked. She fiddled with a strange device in her hands, recalling a conversation she'd once had with a certain man. The future he'd shown her, they'd already managed to escape it, but she still didn't know what this thing in her hands was for. She remembered only the words that man with glowing blue eyes had said. When everything seems over, when the devil's claws reach the one most precious to you, that's when the time will come. But when was the time, exactly? She didn't know. Not yet. 3 days passed. Ada's only comfort during that time was the steady report that Frey's body had started to respond to treatment. With the help of top-level healers, and even one of the most talented Saintus candidates volunteering personally. Uriel Platini, the third-place finisher in the senior division of the island trial, had come herself to assist. Thanks to that, Frey's body had fully recovered except for his aura pathways. Uriel let out a sigh the moment she met Ada. To be honest with you, his body is a mystery, one I haven't been able to solve. After spending hours trying to treat the junior who had caught her attention long ago, Uriel found herself stunned by the strange makeup of his body. His body heals much faster than a normal human's, without leaving any scars. You could say my holy power merely sped up the process. She had heard he spent an entire year trapped in the Eastern Nightmare Lands, but even that didn't explain the bizarre structure of his body. On the other hand, his aura pathways are completely damaged, and yet, not quite. She didn't know how to explain it properly. Yes, his pathways were still broken, but compared to the first day she saw him, they seemed as if healing on their own. Bit by bit, his body was restoring itself. She wasn't sure how true that was, but if it turned out to be real, it would stir the world. After all, she'd never once heard of anyone recovering from destroyed aura pathways. It was supposed to be impossible. All she could say now was, I'll do everything I can. Uriel Platini decided to stay involved, having found something she had never seen before. That night, inside the empty operating room, Fry thrashed violently. His bare body was drenched in sweat, glowing with streaks of light beneath his pale skin. His face twisted in agony, as if wildfire ran through his veins. Even while unconscious, he continued to suffer. His veins pulsed violently. That violet light kept surging through him, igniting muscles that struggled to hold on. His aura pathways were in complete disarray. At that hour, Fry was alone. It was late at night. His designated guard stood nearby, but something was wrong. The man seemed dazed, as if bewitched. His eyes were completely lifeless, despite being someone of S rank. Ada had gone too far. She'd assigned someone like that to guard her brother. For a moment, Fry suffered alone, and in the next second, the number of people in the room went from 1 to 2. Before the suffering Fry, a gray hand, doll-like in appearance, rested gently against his chest. Blue eyes glowing like twin lamps stared down at him. From that hand, a flame of strange blue aura flowed into Frey's chest. The pain was unbearable, but Frey's breathing gradually steadied. His purple aura pathways turned blue, their intensity softening, until they finally settled. Silently, the stranger withdrew his hand. The figure, the engineer, gazed down at Fry before shifting his attention to the snake tattoo on Frey's hand. In silence, he traced his finger across the serpent's form, from the tip of the tail to its fanged head. The snake reacted to him, slithering along his skin the entire way. Then, without warning, The engineer pulled Valyrian from Frey's hand, leaving it exposed. The prideful blade submitted entirely to him. He raised the blade, staring at its abyssal black surface, lost in what seemed like old memories. He had only one hand now, but one hand was enough. Slowly, aura poured into the blade. When the time comes, do your part, old friend. Gently, the engineer returned the sword to Frey's hand. The serpent slithered back to its den, as if it had never moved. And as for the engineer, he had already vanished, while the guard finally returned to his senses. Day 4. That day, the draw was finally announced. The quarterfinal matchups for the Victoriad. Everyone watched the reveal with bated breath, excitement thick in the air. As always, the senior divisions garnered the lion's share of attention. But this time, the first-year bracket had a crowd of its own, one that rivaled, and at times even surpassed, the seniors in sheer enthusiasm. And it showed clearly in the overwhelming response to the draw. Quarterfinal first-year division. Match 1. Snow Lionheart vs. Dawn Polaris. Match 2. Ghost Umbra vs. Ragna Cloud. Match 3. Demon Valyrian vs. Danzo Smasher. Match 4. Final match. Fry Starlight vs. Saris Moonlight. The tournament bracket was starting to take shape. The winner of the first match would face the victor of the second. And the third match's winner would go head-to-head with the fourths. Just like that, the path toward the Victoriad title had been drawn. The Empire now stood at the peak of its glory, shaken repeatedly by one revelation after another. But none more shocking than this, an announcement from the church that left the world in awe. The prophesied hero had finally appeared. The first true hero since the days of Casus Valerian, the founding emperor. Yes, the great sword Vermithor had chosen its wielder at last. And all of this happened while Fry Starlight remained unconscious. Chapter 196. The Chosen Hero. The Empire hadn't known peace in days. A new hero. The sacred sword once wielded by Emperor Casus Valerian has chosen a new master. The first true hero since Casus himself had finally emerged. And his name was Snow Lionheart. A nobody by all accounts. Not a descendant of Valyrian blood. Not from one of the great houses. Just a boy with no known origins. An orphan who had lost his way the day he was born. But the appearance of a new hero meant more than just a name. It marked a shift that would echo throughout the Empire. To the devout zealots of the church, it was euphoria. The hero was considered the messenger of the Lord of Light they so blindly worshipped. And now, Snow Lionheart stood above even the high priests. What the Lord of Light declared was absolute. And if he had chosen Snow, then the most powerful force in the Empire would now kneel before a boy not yet 18. To the faithful, it was a miracle. But to the great houses and the major guilds, it was a warning. Yes, the birth of a hero was a divine event. But in history, a hero was only ever born in times of desperate need, during eras of war that tore the world apart. If a new hero had truly risen, then something worse than ever before was looming on the horizon. And just as the Empire prepared for an all-out war against the Ultras, many still underestimated the scale of what was coming. A conflict that could dwarf even the War of Light itself. While some looked to the future with hope and others with dread, a young man sat quietly in a grand chamber, staring into a mirror. White hair, golden eyes. Snow Lionheart couldn't even recognize his own reflection. Clad in an elegant white jacket embroidered with gold, black polished trousers, and a dark sash flowing behind his back, he looked more like a royal than the orphan he truly was. Immediately after returning from the island test, the church summoned him. Not through a letter or a priest. No, 2 of the highest archbishops came to escort him personally. Michael Platini and Ramiel Callistes. Even now, the words they spoke barely registered in Snow's mind. The Lord of Light had chosen him to be his hero? Snow didn't understand any of it. He knew nothing of faith or gods or destiny. And yet, his thoughts kept returning to one thing. The sword he'd glimpsed from afar. The strongest sword in existence. Vermithor. He was told it had already acknowledged him as its master, a sword of SS rank. Even though he hadn't touched it yet, Snow felt something resonate deep within him, a bond, strange and ancient, like the sword had always been waiting for him. He had long chased strength, and now it had come to him, a weapon that would erase all weakness. And yet, he hesitated. Lost in a storm of thoughts, his door creaked open. An immense pressure washed over him. The woman who entered had crimson eyes and platinum hair barely concealed beneath a pure white veil. Radiant, blinding even. "It's time, chosen hero," she said. She was the saintess Urasha. Snow turned to her, unnerved by how someone so powerful would address him with such respect. "Please, don't call me that." She said nothing. She simply stood behind him in silence. When he stepped out of the room, she followed him without a word. Snow stopped. "Excuse me, but why are you walking behind me?" This kind of treatment was excessive. "The saintess's role is to follow the hero," she replied. "It had always been this way. Even the first hero was always accompanied by a saintess. They were the only ones who could hear the voice of the Lord of Light and deliver his will." "Just call me Snow," he said. "I don't understand your faith. I don't believe in your God." He studied her expression, expecting offense. But her face remained still, serene. "Then tell me," she said, "why did you accept the Lord of Light sword Vermithor?" Snow hesitated for a moment, before finally answering. "Because I want to become stronger." For what reason? Why had Snow fought all this time? When he thought about it, what did he actually have? The answer was nothing. He had already lost everything. His entire world was nothing more than an orphanage, just a worn-down shelter where he was raised among others like him. Children, lost, innocent children who knew nothing, and who died one after another. Back then, how could he have known the orphanage was never really an orphanage at all? It was something else entirely. He had lost it all, but in return, gained an overwhelming hatred. One so intense it burned through his very body and became the fuel that kept him moving. Revenge. "And so no one else ever suffers the same fate I did." The words left his mouth like a curse, spat from somewhere deep within. The saintess looked at him for a brief second. She could never guess the kind of past that had shaped this boy. But she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. "I see. If that's your true desire, then that's enough." What? Would she really accept him, after he had just rejected the very God she devoted her life to? Snow Lionheart was beginning to realize just how strange this saintess really was. She was difficult to read, but her strength was undeniable. She was one of only 2 living beings to have reached SS+ rank, alongside Emperor Mikar himself. Snow chose not to press her further. As they continued on, they arrived at a massive location, one of the Empire's most sacred places. A grand cathedral, second only in size to the Holy Sanctum on the Isle of Sicily. Here, more than 300 years ago, the very first hero, Casus Valerian, had been crowned.
Notre-Dame Cathédrale.
The event was being broadcast live across the entire empire. Snow looked out upon the crowd before him. Hundreds, no thousands, of white-clad pilgrims had gathered from every corner of the land. He walked between them, the saintess following quietly behind. Ahead of him stood the 3 high priests, along with the 11 saintess candidates, each chosen and trained for divine purpose. Leading them was Uriel Platini, the church's brightest prospect and Urasha's heir apparent. As the ceremony began, the candidates unleashed their sacred powers, singing in unison. Snow felt it, a wave of holy energy pouring into him, filling every inch of his body. It was overwhelming. His bones ached from the intensity. His skin buzzed with divine power. He felt as though he might explode at any moment. But his golden eyes never wavered. They were locked on one thing, the sacred sword before him. Vermithor. The world held its breath. Step by step, Snow approached the pedestal until he stood before it. Silence. He reached out slowly and grasped the hilt. Then, without warning, the blade ignited in light. A brilliant wave of radiance surged outward, blinding everyone in attendance. Snow froze in place, paralyzed, as he stood within a pillar of blinding energy. His golden eyes turned pure white. His body trembled as a rush of strength flooded his veins, so powerful it instantly pushed him beyond his current rank. That aura, it made him stronger, stronger than he had ever imagined. With this sword, he felt as if he could do anything. The sensation was almost intoxicating. And in that moment, he saw something. Presence watching him from afar. He couldn't see its face. His senses couldn't comprehend whatever that being was, but he felt its gaze, felt its eyes scanning every part of him. Surrounded by light, Snow stood tall. Inside the cathedral, one by one, every pilgrim fell to their knees. All of them bowed before the chosen hero. And thus another piece fell into place, on that vast shadowed chessboard far above. Chapter 197. The Hardship of the Nightmare. Fry Starlight's POV. How much light does one need to keep moving forward? To keep standing in the middle of endless, suffocating darkness? If you asked me that question, I wouldn't answer you. I'd show you. Standing there, surrounded by a void that swallowed everything. I held onto that thread. A single thread of light that had fallen from above. A fragile line of hope that I've clung to all this time. It wasn't much, barely anything really, but I clung to it desperately, afraid it might snap one day, and take with it the last bit of light I had left. I prayed fervently that this light would lead me to salvation, and not into another hell. Slowly, I opened my eyes, a splitting headache throbbing through my skull. My body felt impossibly heavy, and a harsh light was shining down on me. I lifted myself with difficulty, noticing wires and tubes attached to my body. As I moved, the sound of glass shattering reached my ears. That cursed sound only made my headache worse. Turning my head, I saw a woman staring at me, her hands covering her mouth in shock. "What are you looking at?" I stood up with effort, only to realize I was completely naked. Lord Fry. "I'm so sorry. I'll call Lady Ada immediately." "Ada?" Did I return to House Starlight? The woman didn't give me a chance to ask anything. Damn it. What happened to the test? I remembered blasting those bastards, Kaiser and his partner, to hell, but everything after that was a blur. Did I fail? The very thought made my heart sink. I forced myself toward the door. How long has it been? What happened? Can someone just tell me something? I staggered forward, still naked, barely able to move. I leaned on anything I could, knocking down several medical tools in the process. Just as I reached the door, it opened, and standing there was Ada. Fry! There was something in her eyes, a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to decipher. I could barely stand, but Ada caught me immediately and wrapped a black cloak around my body. Seeing how I trembled, drenched in sweat, she pulled me close and held me tight, keeping me from falling. "It's okay. Fry, everything's all right now." I raised my hand with effort and clutched onto her, too. My head was pounding, as if a hammer was slamming into my skull. But I had to know. I had to know the truth. The trial? Ada, the trial. My breath hitched as panic began to take hold of me again. What happened to the trial? Ada was taken aback by my sudden panic attack, but she moved quickly, her voice steady and warm. "You passed, Fry. You made it. It's over. You're safe now." She didn't know what those words meant to me, but she was smart enough to say exactly what I needed to hear. Despite the pain, her words rang clear in my mind, and unconsciously, I held onto her tighter. I passed. That thread of hope hadn't snapped. I stared blankly ahead, my mind slowly processing it. Carmen was there. I saw old Vulcan, too. Several unfamiliar faces stood around me, but I couldn't focus on any of them. The panic began to fade, like magic, chased away by a few words and Ada's presence. I let them lay me back down. The doctors rushed in again, crowding around me, though I couldn't hear a thing anymore. All I could hear was that persistent, high-pitched ringing, and all I could see was the blur of lights and shadows above me. I could feel Ada's hand gripping mine tightly, and I saw her mouth moving, speaking to everyone around me. As soon as the wires were reattached to my body, the doctors got to work immediately, running checks to assess my current condition. I paid them no attention. My thoughts were elsewhere. I did it. I qualified for the finals. In other words, 3 more matches. 3 more opponents. Just 3 more battles, and I'll finally reach my goal. I noticed the stunned looks on everyone's faces the moment they checked my condition. I saw disbelief etched into their expressions. Ada urged them to hurry and finish. Then the results came in. His body has completely healed. That flawless skin, so healthy it looked as if it had been sculpted, painted, even. Who could believe this was the same ruined body that had been delivered to them not too long ago? But what shocked them wasn't just that. It was what lay beneath that skin and flesh. His aura pathways are completely normal. What they were witnessing simply made no sense. It wasn't like I'd recovered, it was like I'd never been injured in the first place. It defied logic. Even Ada realized just how massive this was. Carmen. On it. Carmen vanished, then reappeared behind each person in the room, striking them in the back of the head, knocking every single one of them unconscious. Ada bit her nail, staring at the bodies on the floor. How many? How many knew about the destruction of my aura channels? Uriel Platini, who left recently, the temple instructors, the other students. Damn it! Even if they silenced everyone in this room, it was impossible to cover everything. In the first place, Ada looked at me. What was that body hiding? What was her brother hiding? But even if she asked me, I wouldn't know the answer either. What happened to me inside the Shadow Sect remains a mystery, even to me. But I didn't care about any of that. There was only one thing that mattered to me. Barely able to speak, still dazed, I muttered, Ada, how long have I been asleep? What about it? What about the Victoriad? She looked conflicted, unsure how to react to a brother whose first question, after all that, was about the Victoriad. But she responded just as she always did. 6 days have passed. The finals start tomorrow. 1 day left. I exhaled with relief. I still had time. Carmen, observing my reaction, was the one who spoke this time. Fry, don't tell me you're planning to fight again? I barely registered her words, but I didn't respond. Her question didn't deserve an answer. It was like asking if I intended to keep breathing. She understood. And so, for the hours that followed, she personally oversaw my recovery. She helped me circulate aura bit by bit, making use of the bond we shared. Since we'd once been linked, her aura was naturally welcomed inside my body. I was grateful to them, both of them. We didn't exchange any words. They simply kept supporting me in silence. Slowly, I came back to my senses. One update after another reached my ears, and the one that brought back my headache. The next hero has been chosen. Snow Lionheart. Too soon. Way too soon, damn it. That was a true disaster. The moment he touched Vermithor, Snow's raw power would increase drastically. He wasn't supposed to obtain it now, and yet here we are. The world keeps playing its twisted games with me. Just how far are you willing to take this? The difficulty of the nightmare. Huh? As I thought, you're the biggest obstacle in my path, Snow. Time passed quickly, and I had only a few hours left to prepare for my match against Ceres Moonlight. Carrying my worn-out body, I pushed forward once again, just like I always had until the very end. Chapter 198. The Beginning of the Victoriad. Fry Starlight's POV. Today, the first day of the tournament. Huff, huff. Sweat streamed down my face as I continued doing push-ups without pause. 500, 501, 502. I moved without stopping, determined to shake off the sluggishness clinging to my muscles. I had to be in peak condition if I wanted even a sliver of a chance to win, especially when my opponents were the best of the best. Last night, I returned to the temple in secret. I stayed awake all night, working with Carmen to restore my body. I didn't need sleep anymore. I had already slept for nearly a week. And today, I would face Ceres Moonlight. I hadn't seen her in a long time, and ironically, the moment I did, I'd be forced to draw my sword against her. I kept moving. Today, that part of the temple would finally be opened. The World Arena, the place that would host the finals of the Victoriad. It resembled a coliseum, but on a much larger scale. A massive space that gave warriors full freedom to fight. It could hold over 300,000 spectators, and the upcoming matches would be broadcast to every corner of the world. I wasn't used to these grand, performative battles, but that didn't change what I needed to do. The matches would begin soon, an hour from now to be precise. Mine was the last, which only made the wait worse, so I drowned the tension in an endless stream of push-ups. Hoof! I exhaled deeply. Calm down. I needed clarity. I reviewed everything I had. All my techniques. Every trump card I had left. I didn't know if they'd be enough. Even my strongest weapon, Ignition, was now a last resort. Using it with a weapon other than Balerion would significantly weaken it, and the weapon itself would shatter from the strain of channeling my body's aura. In other words, if my opponent somehow survived it, it would be over for me. At the very least, I couldn't afford to use it until the final round. Speaking of Ignition, I remembered the overwhelming amount of aura Balerion absorbed last time. I closed my eyes and focused. Moments later, I found myself floating above the endless sea of aura inside me. There, I saw a massive crater in the middle of that violet ocean, slowly refilling over time. Even after drawing out all that power, the overall aura pool inside me had barely changed. In other words, I still couldn't wield this power properly. This body of mine was a mystery in itself. Even the shadow adaptation had refused to respond until the very end. All of it, questions without answers. Even the system's advice, words I'd repeated to myself over and over, meant almost nothing by now. Look into the mirror and understand its reflection. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I wished I knew before it was too late. 6 p.m. The drums roared. The earth trembled beneath the deafening noise of over 300,000 spectators. In the heart of the World Arena, the colossal stadium stood ready for battle. The arena was surrounded by 4 towering stands that stretched into the sky, showcasing the peak of this generation's architecture. Above the colossal bleachers, massive screens hovered mid-air, displaying a rotating stream of images and data. They'd broadcast every upcoming fight to make sure no moment was missed. 2 portraits appeared on those screens now. A young man with black hair and crimson eyes. The other, however, had become the talk of the hour, the center of all attention. His face had already turned into the unofficial symbol of the Empire itself. Snow Lionheart versus Dawn Polaris. The first quarterfinal match. The atmosphere was electric. This was no ordinary event, it was monumental. In every section of the arena, there were VIP boxes prepared for the most influential figures in the Empire. The top-ranked powerhouses, the guild masters, and the heads of noble families. The mages had worked around the clock to prepare everything. A top-tier protection barrier, classified S, was erected to prevent any attacks from leaking outside the stage. Everything was arranged to give the spectators the most immersive experience possible. Most eyes, however, were fixed on one particular VIP section, one reserved for the titans of the Empire, the leaders of the great houses, and the largest seat of them all, the throne of the Emperor who would personally attend this event. The family leaders had arrived. Frost Moonlight, representing the fractured Moonlight family. A young man who took the mantle simply because no one else was left. He had just broken through to S rank recently, and rumor had it he did nothing but train day and night. Behind him stood his mother, Eleanor Moonlight, an SS-ranked powerhouse. The Moonlight family looked very different compared to the past. On the other side sat House Starlight, led by Ada Starlight with Carmen Starlight at her side. That family had pulled itself from the ashes, now unified under the leadership of that sharp young woman. Thanks to her, they had already risen to the second highest position among the noble houses. As for the strongest house currently, it belonged to the old man with the blazing beard. Iris Sunlight laughed heartily as he looked at the new faces filling the seats. Ah, I feel like a stranger in my own time. Has the age of old men like me finally ended? The last time he attended the Victoriad, he sat beside Baylor and Leonidas Starlight. Now he found himself surrounded by youths who hadn't even reached 30. Maybe it's time I step down too. Don't you think so, Phoenix? Behind Iris stood Phoenix Sunlight. He understood the layers behind Iris's words and replied with the same answer he always gave. As long as I can't beat you yet, you're still qualified to lead, old man. So enjoy it while you can. Teske. Youngsters these days, no respect. Iris shook his head, gazing down at the arena. But really, who would have thought the hero would actually appear? Those church bastards have a mighty weapon in their hands now. With the hero emerging from within their ranks, it was safe to say the church had tightened its grip on the people. And if that hero were to rise to the level of the legendary Casus Valerian, then who could possibly stand in their way? Even if his concerns were only speculation, the empire was clearly leaning further and further into the church's influence. What are you going to do, Mikar? If things continued, the emperor might become little more than a puppet, one controlled by the cunning priests of the church. The fact that the church's seats were positioned separately, on the far side of the arena, was the clearest sign of the growing divide. The stands were filled to the brim, 300,000 people watching the grand spectacle. And only minutes later, Emperor Mikar arrived, clad in his usual regal robes, with the masked Oliver Kahn following behind him. The moment they entered, the roar of the crowd exploded into madness. After all, how often did people get the chance to see the emperor this close? Mikar raised his hand to the masses, waving with a confident smile. His expression looked noble and composed, but those close to him knew better. That look was not one of joy. Who could say what the strongest man in the empire was thinking as he watched from above? Meanwhile, the first match was about to begin. Headmaster Ivar stepped forward to deliver the opening speech. As the world waited to witness the debut of the empire's second hero. As for me, I walked through the inner corridors of the stadium. After presenting my identification to the guards, I was escorted to a private room. It was equipped with a large screen and a spacious warm-up area. I chose not to watch the first match from the audience seats. I wanted to avoid the chance of running into anyone I knew. I preferred to remain in the shadows until it was time for my match to begin. Minutes passed slowly as the sound of pounding drums and the thunderous cheers of the crowd echoed in my ears. Finally, the wait came to an end when two young men entered the arena at the same time from opposite sides. Both of them wore specially crafted armor designed for this event. This time, Snow Lionheart was clad in the church's ceremonial white armor, ornately designed, surpassing even those of the noble houses in splendor. As for Dawn Polaris, he wore the armor prepared for him by the temple. Snow still seemed a bit dazed, not fully grasping the weight of his current status, nor used to the overwhelming attention from the crowd. The hero! He was the name on every tongue. Dawn Polaris chuckled awkwardly, watching how the crowd's focus was entirely on his opponent. You look like a completely different person now, Mr. Hero. Don't bring it up. This whole thing is suffocating. They spoke casually, after all, they were friends. To Dawn, Snow was still the same student he'd known before the whole hero title ever existed. You do know losing would cause quite the uproar, right? Just imagining the hero losing after all the hype surrounding him. What a scandal that would be. It was enough to place immense pressure on Snow. But he didn't seem the slightest bit bothered, as if the possibility of defeat didn't exist. Don't worry, I have no intention of losing. Oh! At that moment, Ivar appeared between the two eager combatants. After inspecting them, he confirmed, Your armor is equipped with the same system used during the island trial, only much stronger. In case of a fatal injury, the armor will activate a protection mechanism capable of stopping attacks up to rank S. Upon receiving potentially lethal damage, the armor will emit a disabling wave that knocks you unconscious, resulting in your loss. The match also ends if either of you surrenders, or is unable to continue. Understood. Both nodded simultaneously. Satisfied, Ivar disappeared once more. Seconds later, the signal was given. Let the first match begin. Chapter 199. A Hero and an Assassin. Silence swept the arena as the announcement echoed. Both Snow and Dawn drew their swords. Identical slender blades. Snow would not be allowed to use Vermithor during the Victoriad. It was an event meant to showcase pure, raw skill. Using that blade would have been an unfair advantage. In other words, the playing field was perfectly balanced. Dawn took up his defensive stance, surprised when Snow made no move to attack. He simply held his blade in calm silence. "What are you doing?" he asked, frowning. Snow smiled faintly, his golden eyes now shining with a radiant white glow. "I want to fight you with swords only." Dawn's expression darkened the moment he heard those words. In all their past training sessions, they had sparred hundreds of times using only swords without elemental power.
In pure swordsmanship.
Snow had never once defeated Dawn. But Snow wasn't the same person anymore. "Don't regret it later." Swish! Dawn vanished. In the blink of an eye, he was already at Snow's right side. With a swift slash, he attacked, fast and with incredible finesse. But in the final moment, Snow blocked it flawlessly. Dawn instantly flowed into another set of strikes, each one launched from blind angles. On the other side, Snow met each blow with such rapid, fluid movements that his sword arm seemed to multiply, like the limbs of an octopus. They clashed in a whirlwind of steel. The sharp clanging of metal against metal rang violently in the ears of the spectators, despite their numbers. As Dawn pushed to his maximum speed, he pressured Snow relentlessly, trying to crack that perfect defense. For a moment, it looked like he had the Empire's hero completely on the ropes. Strike after strike, parry after parry, and after several minutes, something began to gnaw at Dawn's mind. Why can't I break through? Snow was fighting solely with his sword, just like Dawn. No techniques, no elements, only pure swordsmanship. And yet, despite that, he was managing to parry every strike Dawn threw at him. Perfectly? Unlike the tense and aggressive Dawn, Snow appeared composed, almost as if he were learning his body anew, discovering what it was now capable of. Sparks flew with each clash of metal, the air charged with tension. After countless exchanges, Dawn leapt back instinctively, widening the distance between them. He didn't quite grasp what had happened, until he reached for his neck. Blood. A shallow cut, barely a scratch, but Snow, amidst all that pressure, had found an opening. And he went for the kill. He failed to land a fatal strike, but the injury proved just how close he'd come. Reacting quickly, Dawn summoned a flame cloud above his sword, enhancing his body with the earth element. He had felt it. The danger radiating off Snow had subconsciously triggered his internal defense mechanism. But that had been a mistake. Snow stepped forward with a faint smile. "Are you sure about this? I was hoping for a longer duel." Step by step, Snow's aura surged. A crushing force. Dawn realized just how badly he'd messed up. By calling upon his power, he had given Snow permission to do the same. And in that realm, Snow was a monster. Damn it all! Dawn charged forward, unleashing a torrent of flames. Snow calmly raised his hand, manipulating the fire Dawn had just cast and dispersing it effortlessly. Dawn intensified his attacks, mixing his flames with advanced swordplay, flickering arcs of red flame slashing towards Snow from every direction, each one capable of cleaving steel. And yet, Snow deflected them all, one after another. Dawn's composure began to crack. His face revealed growing frustration. Even he couldn't deny the rising thought in his head. What if I lose to Snow? To lose in a sword duel of all things. It would be a blow to his pride, especially after the hundreds of sparring sessions they'd fought in the past, where Dawn had always held the upper hand. The arena exploded several times under the sheer heat of Dawn's flames, trapping his opponent in a blazing inferno. He gave it everything he had, but Snow's face remained calm, his eyes glowing with a steady white light. Snow hadn't even used his power. He was simply controlling Dawn's flames, repelling them every time, and with his sword alone he was still dominating. As the exchanges continued, Snow gradually began to lose interest. Then, at one point, flames danced along his blade as well. He finally began to counterattack. Step by step, Dawn found himself pushed back, Snow steadily advancing. Their swords collided with relentless rhythm. Before the eyes of over 300,000 spectators, they watched as Dawn was slowly, steadily forced to retreat. Dawn was unleashing massive flames, enough to engulf the arena in a sea of red. Meanwhile, Snow had barely wrapped his blade in fire. And yet, the outcome was already clear. Watching that clash unfold, I let out a long breath and sank deeper into my seat. It's worse than I thought. Dawn didn't even realize when he'd reached the edge of the arena, his back hitting the stone wall behind him. Still trying to process it, he had no time to breathe. One strike, two, three, and with a final clash, his sword flew from his hands. Snow placed his burning blade against Dawn's neck. He could feel the heat of the steel searing into his skin as Snow gazed down at him. The duel is over, and in that moment, the arena erupted in deafening applause. The roar of the crowd reached its peak. On the other side, Mikar stared curiously at the white-haired young man. He was only 17, and yet, the overwhelming presence he radiated. Snow Lionheart wasn't chosen as the hero for nothing. For a moment, Mikar wondered, was this what his great-grandfather, Casus Valerian, used to look like? For some reason, the Emperor didn't seem pleased by what he was witnessing. As for me, I was starting to get a headache just thinking about how powerful Snow had become. There was a good reason why Vermithor was called the strongest of the 7 swords. It affected its wielder more than it did their enemies. It was said that the holy aura stored within the blade was infinite. The moment he touched the sword, a massive surge of aura burst into Snow's body, propelling his strength to the next level. The only thing that young man had ever lacked was sacred power. And now that he had obtained it as well, it meant that his body would now heal almost instantly every time he got injured, not to mention the endless aura reservoir he now possessed. In other words, even without actively wielding Vermithor, he was still benefiting from it, because the sword had become a part of him. Put simply, an SSS rank aura advantage no longer meant much if the opponent was Snow. This was a real headache. I sank into a whirlpool of grim thoughts, and while I remained lost in that mess of negativity, Ivar reappeared atop the arena and announced the first student from the first-year group to advance to the semifinals. Shortly afterward, the second match was declared, Ghost Umbra versus Ragna Claude. Familiar faces stepped into the ring. Ghost looked the same as ever, his face devoid of emotion. On the other hand, Ragna appeared unusually serious this time. His black hair was messy, reflecting his current state of mind perfectly. Wielding a massive spear, with a body twice the size of Ghost's, the spear-bearer stared coldly at his opponent. Very few people knew the truth behind the death of Isaac Claude, his father. But one thing was certain, his death had a huge impact on the boy. Just like the match between Snow and Dawn, Ivar gave the signal, and the duel began instantly, no warning. Gathering a large amount of fire aura at the tip of his spear, Ragna charged forward in a straight line, aiming to strike Ghost's face. The latter bent his body at an impossible angle, dodging the spear's edge aimed at his head. Ghost stared silently at Ragna, who continued stabbing fiercely toward him. His strikes were fast and powerful, but Ghost demonstrated incredible agility and nimbleness. Normally, an assassin should lose the moment they're exposed, since they're at their strongest from the shadows. But Ghost Umbra was an exception. Even when revealed, he could still fight head-on against a spear wielder like Ragna. Ragna spun his spear like a fan in his hands and began swinging faster, launching fiery projectiles in Ghost's direction. At one point in the battle, Ghost drew his daggers, using them to block Ragna's attacks. And yet, Ragna's spear was utterly strange. Despite the distance between them and the spear's limited reach, This tip managed to strike Ghost's body every single time. He can erase the distance between himself and his target, Ghost muttered as he continued analyzing his opponent. On the other side, Ragna stabbed the ground, and as if by magic, dozens of spears erupted from beneath Ghost's feet, shooting upward. Ghost leapt high into the air, evading every strike aimed at him with flawless precision. Ragna tried to strike him mid-air, but it was no use. Even without touching the ground, Ghost moved with effortless efficiency. Why can't I land a hit on him? Ragna cursed, unleashing wave after wave of destruction across the arena in an attempt to catch Ghost. But calmly, almost silently, Ghost advanced, closing the distance between them in a blink. Ragna's spear was fast, unnaturally fast. It somehow erased the space between him and his target. And with the added pressure of the ever-burning fire aura, his offense was relentless. And yet, Ghost dodged everything. You're not going to land a hit on me with attacks like that. His voice was cold, completely unfazed. Veins bulged across Ragna's forehead, rage twisting his expression. What the hell did you just say, you smug bastard? He roared as his strikes intensified, leaping toward Ghost. Dozens of spears materialized around him, raining down like a storm upon Ghost's head. But, I already told you, you're not going to hit me. Slash. Ghost's hands moved like serpents, slashing through Ragna's defense with terrifying precision. How do you expect to hit your opponent when you let your emotions rule your every move? The first thing an assassin like Ghost learns isn't stealth, isn't how to wield a blade. It's how to silence their emotions, how to suppress the very intent to kill. Assassins like Ghost could read killing intent in a single glance. And Ragna, he was an open book. Your rapid strikes, your techniques designed to ensure contact. I see through all of them. Swish. More gashes opened across Ragna's body. You bastard! Ragna slammed his spear into the ground again, triggering a massive eruption of steel spears all around. But Ghost was already above him. Letting your emotions drive your body however they please. That's what'll get you killed. With both hands, Ghost slashed at Ragna's neck from both sides. Fatal blow. But the arena's protective armor activated at the last moment, absorbing the strike. Even so, the feedback from the clash knocked Ragna unconscious instantly. Ghost landed cleanly on his feet. He turned and walked away, exiting the ring amid roaring applause. He wasn't the son of the world's deadliest assassin for nothing. And with that, the second semi-finalist was revealed. Chapter 200, Demon Valerian vs. Danzo Smasher. As expected, Ghost advanced to the next round. The silent assassin had put on an incredible performance that kept the crowd cheering non-stop. Iris Sunlight nodded in approval at the level displayed by the first-year students. The first years have shown remarkable talent this time. He scanned the stands with his aura, searching for someone. But the one he was looking for was nowhere to be found. Teske, aren't you going to come cheer for your son? Or did you come already, and I just wasn't able to detect you? Iris muttered to himself as he searched for Mist Umbra, Ghost's father. Mist had been severely wounded during the last raid on the Ultras, but he had already recovered and returned to his role as the head of the Shadow Court not long after. Even Iris Sunlight wouldn't be able to sense the presence of that assassin unless he got close enough. First-year matches were supposed to be the most boring, just an appetizer compared to the upper-year bouts scheduled for later. And yet, this time around, the first years had drawn the most attention due to the weight of the names involved. The audience discussed the top candidates for victory, and many of them mentioned Snow Lionheart. But not all bets were placed on him. A significant number leaned toward someone else entirely. Demon Valerian, the proud lion of the Imperial family. Even with Snow holding the title of the hero, there were still those who believed Demon would defeat him. And Demon's match was about to begin. Match 3. Demon Valerian vs. Danzo Smasher. His opponent was the son of one of the great guild leaders, Adam Smasher. Both fighters specialized in close combat and held the tank position, which meant the audience was about to witness a clash loaded with brute force. It wasn't rare to see spectators fiddling with their smartwatches. At first glance, it seemed normal, but it wasn't. Big matches like this were the perfect opportunity for that kind of high-stakes entertainment. The bets. Bet on your favorite to win, and make a fortune. People frequently gambled large sums during such events. Everyone had already chosen their champion, and the votes were in even before the fight began. Demon Valyrian, 81% to 19% Danzo Smasher. The vast majority bet on Demon, and who could blame them, after all the dominant performances he had shown so far? But his opponent wasn't to be underestimated. Adam Smasher sat among the spectators. His massive body, taking up 3 full seats on its own, stood out noticeably. It was clear how eager he was to see his sons fight. And finally, the crowd erupted in applause as both fighters entered the ring. Demon Valyrian, in his black armor inlaid with gold, stood across from Danzo in his silver-plated gear. They were evenly matched in size and height. 2 muscular giants. Demon's golden eyes stared coldly at Danzo. It was obvious from the start, he wasn't even slightly interested in his opponent. And that irritated Danzo more than anything. "Hey, that face of yours." Danzo smiled ominously, matching Demon's presence head-on. "I'm gonna smash that cold face of yours real soon." Demon Valyrian didn't say a word, but the crackling of lightning in the air said plenty. Ivar Valyrian appeared between them. He recited the standard announcement, then cast a brief glance at his son. Demon, however, didn't spare him even the slightest look. Seeing himself completely ignored, Ivar vanished, signaling the start of the match. And the moment he did, the 2 tanks charged at each other like 2 speeding trains crashing head-on. They locked hands and pushed with everything they had. Their feet sank into the ground from the force of the collision, their auras sending out wave after wave of pressure. Danzo exerted all his strength, trying to overpower Demon. He clenched his teeth, gathering every ounce of power in his body. The ground quaked beneath his feet as he forced Demon back, step by step. "I told you." Veins bulged across Danzo's muscles as he summoned every ounce of strength. "I'm going to crush that smug face of yours." With pure brute force, Danzo hoisted his opponent and slammed him into the ground, shattering the arena beneath them. Light maneuver. In an instant, 6 aura-formed arms burst from Danzo's back, and he began pounding his opponent with relentless force. Boom! 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 He unleashed hundreds of punches at a blinding speed, stirring up clouds of dust all around them. The crowd watched, stunned, as Danzo's ferocious onslaught raged on. It looked like he had completely overwhelmed his opponent, but those glowing golden eyes had a different story to tell. Amidst the storm of blows, Danzo suddenly found himself airborne. He never even saw it coming. With a single lightning-infused punch to the chest, Demon had sent him flying, smashing him straight into the arena wall. Demon stepped through the haze, electric serpents coiling around his body like predators. "Who's getting crushed now, brat?" He vanished, and reappeared before Danzo in the blink of an eye. The punch that followed was absurdly fast for someone with his build. It slammed Danzo's face into the wall, detonating the area around them with the sheer force of his lightning-charged aura. Demon buried him, but the fight wasn't over yet. From beneath the rubble, a hand shot out and seized him. Danzo, bloodied and battered, retaliated with a powerful blow, launching Demon backward as his feet tore deep trenches into the ground. Light maneuver. Danzo's fists flared with pure white aura. On the other side, lightning surged and crackled around Demon's arms. Dragon Gate. 2 raging dragon heads formed behind him as Demon glared at his opponent. "Try and last a little longer." He laughed manically before charging in. "Let me enjoy this." The 2 titans collided, flaming fists clashing with roaring dragons. Every strike shattered flesh and bone. Golden lightning clashed with blinding white aura. Danzo's punches took the shape of colossal aura fists, while Demon's dragons tore through them with primal rage. The arena trembled as the 2 pummeled each other in a frenzy of violence. Blood began to splatter across the floor. Demon laughed, wild and unhinged. You're tough, I'll give you that. But that's all you've got. His fists hammered into Danzo's body like sledgehammers. Toughness alone wasn't enough to take down Demon. Both had taken their share of damage, but Danzo's wounds were far more severe. He tried to fight back, but Demon's unrelenting assault left no room to breathe. Damn it! I won't lose! Danzo roared, pushing with everything he had. He was sure he had landed a blow, but Demon was just as fast as he was strong. For every strike Danzo threw, Demon countered with 10. His opponent was overwhelming, impeccable. Blood ran down Danzo's forehead. His soaked gray hair stuck to his skin, blinding his vision as dizziness clouded his mind. The arena around them lay in ruins, shattered repeatedly during the battle. And after minutes that felt like hours to Danzo, lightning had begun to consume Demon completely. With the advantage secured, Demon conjured blades of wind behind Danzo's back, closing in from every direction. Then, unleashing a storm of devastating punches, he finally forced Danzo to stagger, barely clinging to consciousness. Told you, you're tough. But that's all. Demon stood still, barely scratched. There was no point in continuing. His opponent had nothing left to give. Danzo, drenched in blood, barely kept his balance. But as Demon paused, Danzo gathered the last of his strength. A final surge of radiant energy formed around his right fist. Demon's eyes narrowed, surprised to see his opponent still fighting. Light maneuver, heaven-shattering fist. Danzo's right arm erupted with blinding white light as the veins inside burst under the strain of raw power. Danzo launched a sudden punch aimed straight at Demon's face, the opening he'd been waiting for. And without warning, a deafening explosion rocked the entire arena. Danzo had gambled everything on that single, unexpected strike. It was his one and only chance against a monster who outclassed him in every way. Boom! He poured his all into that blow. Even Demon himself hadn't expected his opponent to pull off an attack like that. From afar, the crowd witnessed the final stand of Danzo Smasher. As the light and dust finally cleared, Danzo stood, barely upright. In front of him, his strike had carved a straight path through the arena, erasing everything in its way. And at the very end of that trail, his back against the far wall, stood Demon Valerian. He had crossed both arms in an X formation. Dark lightning aura coiled around him like a shield. Moments later, Danzo collapsed, unconscious after giving everything he had in that one desperate strike. On the other hand, Demon Valerian stared at his fallen opponent, then at his own arms. A deep bruise had left his limbs trembling slightly. If he hadn't conjured the dark lightning aura in time, that hit could have been the end of him. But even with all that effort, Danzo couldn't win. Demon Valerian turned and walked away as his voice echoed through the arena. Not bad, Danzo Smasher. I'll remember your name. That final blow left many spectators stunned. Perhaps it was the brutality of the fight, or perhaps it was the silence that followed. But the crowd reacted slowly to the end of match 3. And then, thunderous applause erupted for both warriors who had just delivered the most intense battle yet. Even Adam Smasher had tears in his eyes, a sight that didn't quite match the bald, iron-willed man. As for Ivar Valerian, he showed no particular reaction to his son's victory. Demon Valerian, just as incredible as ever. Words of praise came from none other than the Emperor, Mikar Valerian, leaning on one hand as he watched the battlefield from above with a faint smile. He's quite fitting indeed, Oliver Kahn commented in response to the Emperor, though the tone in his veiled voice sounded more like polite flattery than genuine admiration. The young warriors of the Empire had proven themselves capable thus far. Amid the roaring cheers of the crowd, slow-motion replays of the previous match were broadcast, helping everyone grasp the full scope of the battle. It was all made possible by Luke Valerian, the greatest mage within the Empire's walls. The young sorcerer manipulated intricate spell circles, and in a matter of moments, the arena was restored to its original form. These kids really love making a mess. Overseeing a massive team of mages, Luke was the chief organizer of the duels. His job was only beginning, as Match 4 was about to ignite. Without warning, the giant screens flared to life. Match 4, Fry Starlight versus Ceres Moonlight.